I want to know who it was.
All right, we are ready to go.
All right, good evening, everyone. The time is now 5:01 p.m. on February 3rd, 2021. And this meeting of the District of Columbia State Board of Education is now called to order. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Mr. Hayworth, please call the roll.
Dr. Gasoy. Dr. Gasoy. Mr. Chang. Mr. Chang. Ms. Wattenberg.
Present.
Dr. O'Leary.
Present.
Mr. Parker.
Present.
Dr. Sutter.
Present.
Ms. Thompson.
Present.
Dr. Reed.
Present.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Present.
Ms. Dell. Ms. Dell. Mr. President, you have quorum.
You have some other members who are here now, sir, and you didn't call me Patterson, sir.
Why is it that I cannot remember to call you, Mr. Patterson? I apologize. Mr. President, please note that Mr. Patterson, Ms. Gasoy, and Mr. Chang have also joined us.
Thank you. A quorum has been determined and the state board's meeting will proceed. I want to start by welcoming a very special guest, Deputy Mayor Kine, to our working session tonight. Deputy Mayor, I will not have a prolonged introduction because I want to savor time so we can get in as many questions as possible, but I'm thrilled to invite you and to discuss the efforts that your office are undertaking to ensure that our schools can reopen strong. So with that, Deputy Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. It's very good to be here. Congratulations to the new office holders, and I'm looking forward to a very productive and continued working relationship with the State Board. I look forward to our discussion today. I wanted to spend a few minutes up front. There's a 4-minute timer going, so I assume that's my allotted time. Please, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I wanted to spend a few minutes just sharing what we in the Deputy Mayor for Education's office and city government are beginning to focus on in terms of our recovery and healing effort for the city as schools begin to reopen, as we begin to get our educators vaccinated, and as we think about how collectively we will work to mitigate all of the challenges that have been promoted and provoked by the virus. And just a couple of initial thoughts. Firstly, for me, and I think for all of us, this has got to be a very deeply collective effort. And I think it's a terrific opportunity for government, all of its agencies, along with the nonprofit sector and the private sector, to get behind all of the work that we've got to do, which is tremendous in order to accelerate learning amongst our young people across the city. Secondly, I've had a lot of conversations about this over the past year, and I think it remains imperative that we are really guided by the best possible data and information, because we are going to end up in situations where we're trading off different interventions and different ideas and different actions, and we have to really deploy our resources and our people in the areas that need them the most. So, for example, one of the things that I think was really interesting about the learning loss so-called study that Empower K-12 did is that the math slide has been greater than the literacy slide, which means we've got to make sure we're paying attention to math in ways that that some folks, I think, found unexpected. On the workforce and inclusive jobs recovery side, it's interesting to note 61% of our unemployment insurance claimants don't have a bachelor's degree. 29,000 jobs have come out of the hospitality industry. And so those are places that clearly we need to devote special attention as we're thinking about our comprehensive work across my office. So we need to be informed by the data. And then lastly, I'll just share that along with being informed by the data, it is an extraordinary opportunity. I know you all see it this way. It's your jobs as part of this board, but it's extraordinary opportunity for us to center ourselves in community needs and community insights so that we very deeply understand those who've been most affected by this virus, what they say they need, and we have to listen to that. So we are certainly intending to do that across government, and I know you will be strong partners in that as well. I'll share a brief word on the specific areas of work that we'll probably end up talking about today, and areas that are going to make up the focus of a lot of my work and the work of my office over the coming months. We begin with youth safety as a foundation to all of our work on this. And by youth safety, what I mean is physical safety, that's of students as they travel back and forth, and their physical safety in schools, and also their social and emotional health and well-being in schools as well. Lots of young people have experienced lots of trauma over the course of this pandemic, and we have to be ready to care for them and their families as they return to schools over the spring and summer and fall. We've got to ensure that, again, they travel safely back and forth. We're working closely with the WMATA Transit Police, SROs, security personnel to ensure we've got strong supplemental training in place for conflict resolution and the proactive work that they all need to do. My office did some very promising pilots around so-called man the block initiatives, getting adults that are trusted in streets to help support students and sustain them. The ONES office has expanded its work of violence interruption into 2 new schools over the course of this year. So we continue to watch that. And then on the social and emotional health and well-being, one thing DBH is very focused on is ensuring families have access to all the information about the services that are provided. They have found through focus groups that families don't always know or understand how to access the kinds of support that's available through schools. And we're also working with DBH on the best deployment of their school-based mental health clinicians to ensure that the tier 2 and 3 interventions that occur in schools are as strong as they can possibly be. We are continuing to work with OSSI on educator wellness as part of this. Educators that are not well, that don't feel as though they themselves are strongly supported and have the emotional supports they need, will not do as good a job with our young people. So we do see that as a priority as well. And then we continue to promote, for example, the communities of practice amongst school-based personnel on their SEL programming. So these are topics that are very familiar to you all, but those are examples of the kinds of ways in which we have to collectively support youth safety. I'll share briefly then on the specific topics around what I'll call more academically oriented learning acceleration. And here we believe there are 6 important areas that we collectively need to focus on. The first is stabilizing our early childhood sector. We've done a lot of work to help support and sustain childcare centers across the city because of the absolute importance that they have to our young people's well-being. Right now, you probably are aware that still only about 2/3 of those centers are open. We've done a number of things to support those that are open, including increasing the subsidy payments. We've made additional grants available to them through DMPED. We've loosened some of our attendance policies, but we're trying to ensure that the business models that they have continue to be viable for them while we provide technical assistance and try to ensure that additional centers can and will open throughout the city. We also believe, and I know I personally think this, the virus is insidious, and we have no idea what the world will look like in September. We do know that there will be no child vaccine probably by then. And so we need to prepare for a September that is not necessarily going to be normal. So we should be preparing for a September that could have some version of hybrid or virtual ongoing. So we also think it's important that we continue to support our teachers who are at the center of this endeavor as they continue strengthening their virtual education skills. And we're doing that through OSSI and some other ways. Thirdly, we know it's critical that learning time be extended for students that actually need it. And we believe that it's important that we take full advantage of all of our government services in order to do that. We did a pilot last year of literacy instruction for students. And one thing we observed is that it was actually relatively difficult to get families to just come and sign up for that as a standalone effort over the summer. And so this summer, we're looking at actually trying to go where young people are. So we're talking to the Department of Employment Services about the Summer Youth Employment Program and ways that we can use that to embed some tutoring and some academic supports. We're talking with DPR about ways in which we might be able to use some of their summer programming to embed some of this important academic support for accelerating learning. And we know that from conversations with LEAs that many of them are considering summer acceleration academies, these evidence-based 2 to 3 week programs that are focused on specific subjects that we think will be critical for many of our students. In addition to that learning time, and I know you all held a really fascinating panel discussion on specifically on high dosage tutoring. So we also, and I think this is going to be vital to many of our city's young people to ensure they have access to high dosage tutoring. We're working to partner with some folks in the private sector to get some additional support for this. We know that many LEAs are planning on using their federal funding to support this. We know high dosage tutoring is best embedded at schools. And so we're looking for ways to support the implementation of high dosage tutoring across the city. Fifthly, our fifth area is in accelerating credit attainment. It's really important that we don't see our high school students fall off track. It's really important that we continue to see high school students graduating and continue to graduate in greater numbers. So we're excited about the work of UDC, the BARD Consortium, OSSI's Dual Enrollment Consortium. All of these things we think are going to help ensure that our high school students remain supported. And of course, we're working with LEAs on innovative approaches to credit recovery and potentially to do some sharing of support services there. Lastly, families have been an extraordinary partner in the work of virtual learning across the city. And we know that many families still struggle with supporting virtual learning. And we are looking for ways to continue to push out resources, skills, and other supports for families that need it. So I'll pause there. I'm trying to give you a flavor of the various lanes of work and the comprehensive nature of what I think lies before us. And I'm excited to both take your questions, but I'm also honestly hoping for your feedback and input on the kinds of things you're hearing from your constituents that they need as we turn our attention to recovery and healing across the city. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Zach.
Thank you for that. I'm really excited to dig in more. Members, we're going to have 4-minute rounds to maximize our time with the Deputy Mayor. And so if you can keep your questions concise, and Deputy Mayor, if you can keep your answers concise, we'll be able to cover more ground. John Paul, I'm going to ask that you call on members as you see them. And then members, if you could just raise your hand through the participants panel, or you could do it the old-fashioned way and just raise your hand on the screen. And I'm going to turn it over to John Paul to call.
Thank you. Dr. Reed.
Good evening, Deputy Kine, and thank you for joining us this evening. I'll start with, I appreciate your indicating, that the Deputy Mayor's office is interested in going and meeting students where they are, especially around the literacy initiative and pairing possibly with the Mayor's Summer Youth Program. I think that is very key in the development of well-rounded students. I've also heard from some of my high school partners that, some students might be disengaging to take jobs. And unfortunately, individuals are taking these students. So just I think it'll be a good pairing of, a reputable job source and, the skill sets that students may need. My 2 questions are, what are your budget asks as we're entering this budget season? What are your budget asks around safety as well as enhancement for virtual learning? And then have the child care centers that have not been able to open yet, have they indicated or been able to communicate what are their barriers around reopening?
Thank you for both questions. I think in terms of the specifics around budget asks, there are several dynamics at play within the city as it develops this budget. So first of all, we always work hard, as you've seen from this mayor and this administration, to ensure that schools actually get what they need year over year. So we work hard on the UPSFF. We're trying to calculate in the federal government stimulus money that's coming in. So the second round, as you probably are aware, is 4 times greater than the first round. So the LEAs are going to be getting funding that we know will support a lot of this work. And then internal to government, we continue to work with our agency partners to see what we think is going to be most effective, and then what we might be able to do in terms of expansions of services. I will share with you something that I'm sure you know. I've said, I think, with this group before, this is an extremely difficult budget year. There's just no other way around it. We've taken hundreds of millions of dollars out of our revenue forecast and out of the city budget. And so that does not mean we can't provide for our young people and our residents what they need, but it does mean that we've got to make very difficult trade-off trade-off decisions within the city budget as a whole. So we continue to look at all of those things. On the early childhood center, one of the biggest barriers for those that haven't been able to open is that if they've got private pay families, which many of them do, and they've got these cohort restrictions in terms of the numbers of young people that they can actually have in their center, their business model literally doesn't work. And so that's why we've worked hard, at least on the subsidy payment, which we have some control over, to try to promote additional funding for them.
And is there a clock, John Paul? I apologize. Or can someone tell me how I'm doing on time?
There is. You have about a minute left.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, Deputy Kine, I'll just kind of close with a comment. And I really think, I appreciate your answer. But I hope there are specific asks around like safe passages, being in Ward 8. We've had a couple of incidents, especially on a route that I know Anacostia High School students take, or a store that they use. So I hope that there are specific asks from your office in regards to enhancing the safety. And I do understand it seems like the federal dollars are going to be what is relied heavily on, but I hope there are some specific asks from your office or your partner agencies. And then the same with virtual learning. We are learning a lot of enhancements need to be made in order to make teachers or schools and families successful with adopting that model. So again, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Dr. Sutter.
Thank you. Hi, Deputy Mayor Kine. Glad to have you here tonight. I want to start with a question about vaccinations. I had a conversation today with some folks who work with early childhood providers. They noted that the early care providers have been slotted to the same vaccination delivery process that charter school teachers and independent school teachers are part of. So they're working with One Medical. They have to use a portal and make appointments. Two questions they asked me to try to get answers from you about. Do we have a sense of how many slots are available via that system of vaccination delivery? And are they allocated for those different groups working with One Medical, or are they sort of come one, come all across those three groups? And second, how many delivery locations are for that? Because it sounds like there may only be two places folks can go, and that's a large swath of folks across the city going to two places that seem to be far apart from one another.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I have to say, I don't know the exact number of vaccinations that are made available each week through that portal. And it is going to be the portal where we work with our essential workers going forward. So the educators and staff in charter schools that are open serving young people were first in that portal, but that is actually going to be the way in which DC Health administers vaccine appointments for essential workers going forward. So you may be aware, for example, that DCPS and some charter staff had their vaccinations at Dunbar through a partnership with Children's National. That lasted for 1 week and was a very special setup for particular reasons. And now we're very excited to have this partnership with One Medical, in part because it can take advantage of Pfizer vaccines, which are much more difficult to actually store and manipulate, as you know, because they have a much lower temperature.
Got it. That's also the location issue.
And so therefore, you can't actually have them spread out to all the community locations. And those are being used for the strand of work that DC Health is running on the morbidity and mortality vaccinations, particularly for our city's elderly. So. Okay. And we know that there are 1,000 plus vaccines that go into that tranche, typically, I think at least weekly, but I don't know the exact numbers. And then to your question about whether they're allocated across those different groups, the answer, as far as I know, is no, they're not. Okay. Because you basically have a number of essential workers working in person that are now eligible for the vaccine, and we're not sort of trying to prorate or figure out a ratio of who should get what, but rather we're trying to provide as many as we possibly can.
Okay, with my 1 minute left, I wanted to shift to summer planning. So I'm glad to hear you talking about DPR partnerships, et cetera. I will say one thing I worry a little bit about is that I'm hearing from all the groups you're talking about the independent projects they are setting up. And I wish there were some sort of central effort to at least coordinate and notify families and children in the city of the options that might exist. And I would hope that happens soon. And I'll say because some of my neighbors in Ward 6 have already started making plans for the summer. And I think we'll see more and more families make plans in the absence of city options if we don't get our options in front of families quickly. So it is my hope that these disparate plans that are happening, the LEA consortiums, I know City Bridge Education is planning some work around tutoring, that there's just some central way to communicate that this is a citywide effort led by various parties rather than disparate efforts that are separate and apart from one another.
Duly noted and concurred with. So
Awesome.
Thank you for the comment.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Kine.
Thank you, Dr. Sutter. Ms. Thompson.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor Kine. I feel like some of my questions actually pick up where Representative Reed left off. I'd really like to hear a bit more about the plans for virtual learning, kind of what's needed in relation to the budget. Like, this is the first COVID budget we've had, and how you're working with agency partners, like which agency partners are needed to provide some of those supports, especially around safe passage, mental health, fed, because that's what our families are concerned about.
Thanks, Ms. Thompson, and congratulations. I haven't had a chance to congratulate you on your election here, and I'm looking forward to working with you in this new capacity as well. To your question on what's required, I think to strengthen virtual learning, I think my own perspective, which I'm sure is shared by many on this call, is the heart and soul of virtual learning is clearly teachers. And so in terms of the work that my office is planning to, what we're planning to contribute specifically to the strengthening of virtual learning, it really does focus on additional supports for teachers. So for example, as teachers have shared, they need something that looks a little bit like virtual coaching with trusted partners. That's something that we think we can actually help weigh in on, potentially through OSCE to help support. So I think the virtual learning component in terms of what makes it strong is giving teachers what they need in terms of their own development and growth. On the question about safety and what partners, I would say all city partners that you could imagine are critical, and we've been engaging in discussions with them. So for example, starting with the public safety personnel, I, for example, had a meeting with the chief of the WMATA Transit Police a few days ago. They've been very strong partners with us, and we're talking about ways to ensure that as more and more young people come back, and in particular, as more and more young people are getting out of schools that they're attending with no after school activities or no sports to go to, but more of them are coming out in the afternoon, that we're ready and that the transit police and those that are on Metro are engaging in the kinds of constructive supports for them that are going to minimize any difficulties or challenges. Similarly with security and MPD. But I think more importantly, on the supportive side, the Department of Behavioral Health and CFSA have been at the table all along in trying to work with us and with schools to strengthen their offerings during the pandemic. And for example, DBH has shared that they have had a number of offerings that families haven't really taken them up on. And what they feel like they've learned is mostly it's because families didn't know about them. And so there's work to do on the information and information sharing and advertising of those things. So those are some of the ways in which we're working with them.
Is there some way to access a list of some of the available but under-enrolled services? Because a lot of what, honestly, I've heard from families is that that's what they need. So what's available to help promote?
It's a good question, and we are working with them to develop a kind of a communication package on that. So Lakeisha from my team, who's on, Lakeisha Fox, I'm just going to ask her to make sure we follow up with you once we have it, so that we can get that disseminated more broadly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary.
Good evening. I've got 4, maybe 5 questions. They're all short answer questions. Number one is, last week, what percentage of teachers and staff in DCPS and the charters were vaccinated?
What percentage were vaccinated?
Yeah.
We vaccinated, well, we on the charter side, we actually don't yet have the results back from One Medical about the number.
DCPS is fine.
That I'll share with you that we alerted over 4,000 charter teachers who were eligible. So that's the number I have on the charter side. DCPS, the number of invitees, I think was comparable to that, a little bit higher. I think it was 4,200 educators, staff,
Right.
contractors working in person. And I know that they had, that many vaccines available, or maybe just over 3,000. So, and most of them were used, but I don't have the exact number, but it was a high proportion of that number, Dr.
Okay,
O'Leary.
thank you. When you were talking about families not knowing about certain things, could that have to do with the information is sent online? It seems to me, talking for the last year with people, that a lot of people were sort of missed information because they weren't on their computers, so they didn't have access to their computers. And even though supposedly every student has a device now, that the information hasn't been sent to them on that device. So it seems to me it'd be very simple to get the information out to the students every day because they're looking at their screens every day. Maybe that's a comment rather than a question. Number 3, I noticed, because we have a lot of child care centers in Ward 4, and I see a lot of little baby children that are in child care centers. They're out walking and doing things and everything like that. And I know that their child care centers can have been checked for their ventilation and everything like that. Am I wrong?
The child care centers have to adhere to strict safety protocols like everyone else, and OSSI has indeed been monitoring those, the child care centers, as they always do.
Okay, if that's true, and I believe you, then why can't early childhood students go back to the buildings?
I don't understand the question, Dr. O'Leary.
I'm saying, why can't children who are 3, 4, and 5 years old have already been in the buildings at the same time as the people who were in child care centers?
In which buildings?
Any buildings that have early childhood centers, the elementary schools.
I don't think I quite understand the question. It's perfectly allowable for early childhood centers and schools to have 3 and 4-year-olds participating in educational activities.
Okay. My last question is, you mentioned SROs. Do we still have SROs in the buildings?
Yes.
And when will that stop?
DCPS is doing its review of its entire security plan, as you know. So I'm not certain about what the specifics of that is going to be or where it's going to land.
Okay, thank you. My time's up.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Mr. Patterson.
Yes, thank you. And good to see you, Deputy Mayor. Mine is around, and I don't know if others have gotten the vaccination, but I did have the opportunity to get the vaccination, and it is a very cumbersome process, so to speak, of getting an appointment and everything. So my question, it revolves around trying to be proactive, and have you given thought to how are we going to do this once the vaccine is available for the general population, and specifically marginalized and underserved communities, making sure that they are getting shots at the equity that they basically need. As we know, our community has not, I live in Ward 8, has not gotten shots or gotten even tests at an equitable level. So I want to make sure that we put in place the type of things that make sure that they are available, that we have the mechanics to make sure that they can get to those places easily. Have you given thought to maybe using schools, or have you guys even given thought to how you guys are going to vaccinate parents?
So to take your last question first, at this point, and I'll defer you to DC Health on virtually all of your questions, but I will offer a couple of observations. One is, at this point, parents are not considered in a separate category from residents. And of course, parents and caregivers, if they're older, are currently in the pool, but will be considered with residents as we go on. On the equity question, what the administration has done, as I'm sure you're aware with the elderly population, is to prioritize certain, initially it was wards, but then it was zip codes for those who were elderly signing up. And they each week were given an extra day to sign up for the appointments, and they had more doses available to them than were available subsequently to residents who lived across the city. So I would anticipate that the city and DC Health would continue in that equitable approach as we vaccinate more and more residents.
Just to follow up to make sure that I'm getting the full answer, are they providing any kind of technical support with that? Because as we know, there's a lot of digital divide, specifically east of the river, where this is hard to get onto the system. If you've gotten your shot, they go very quickly. If you don't know how to navigate it, is there any technical support for those communities that are underserved or marginalized?
What DC Health did, which I thought was a very good effort, was they added a lot of capacity to their call center, and they were able to ensure that they had folks calling in had access to appointments. So that was an effort that they made to overcome what is obviously a very real digital divide in some communities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Mr. O'Sullivan.
Thank you, John Paul, and it's good to see you again, Deputy Mayor Kine. I have a couple questions. The first was kind of an extension to what Dr. Reed brought up about SYEP. So I have a couple friends, and I know people across the city. I think they're about a total of like 6 or so people who are actually like working jobs now. I have a couple friends who are even missing school to work those jobs, and like, I don't know, it just that's something that you never really want to hear as a student, and something that like in my role, it kind of pains me to hear that, because I mean, obviously there are reasons people need to go and maybe be a caretaker for their family, bring in funds, whatever they need to do. But I was thinking, we already have a program like this for the summer where people can make money. And I heard something at the beginning of the year. One of the groups that I've previously done SYEP with was emailing us about how they were extending it for the full year for some select students. I never heard back on that, but I was curious to know, can we do that now? And can we increase the amount of pay specifically for high schoolers, people of high school age, that they can actually, instead of miss school, find some way for them to continue to work in school while also being employed by SYEP in a way so that they don't miss all of the things that like are contributing to learning loss.
Thanks, Mr. O'Sullivan. I think that's an excellent question. And yes, there are a certain number of seats, which is relatively small compared to the overall summer program, made available to young people who are going to continue through the course of the year. And I think that's typically older high school students or even graduates. So there is a way that the sort of earn and learn component, where you're paid for your work-based learning experiences in a subsidized way, does continue for some select number of students. Is it possible that we could look to expanding or extending that? Absolutely. It's not clear to me where that would land right now in the list of our budget priorities, but I think it's an excellent idea, and I will certainly contribute it to the ongoing conversations we're having as a city in ways to meet the needs of high school students. I mean, I would hope your friends who are working and not in school might be able to find their way back into school at some point. And I think we've got to look to see what are the ways in which we could help encourage them to do that and provide the supports that they need. So that might be one of them.
Well, I think a way we could go about it, and I think something that I would recommend the mayor's office look at, is actually how many public school students, how many students in our city are currently working a separate job or having to miss school time for like a work-related reason, because I don't think that should be happening. Obviously, one of the people I know like is told to school, so they have the ability to like skip the classes at least. So it's not technically like they're just being absent, but like it's still not something that that we would like to see. And I think it's important to know how frequently this is occurring and where it's happening. I have two other questions. One of them just kind of a point. I heard you were saying you wanted to hear more about distance learning and how to support families and students. And I'd recommend that you attend our Student Advisory Committee's distance learning event in 2 weeks on Tuesday, the 16th, where you can hear from students across all 8 wards about some of their experiences. And my last thing was, where did you get the information about COVID vaccinations for children? Because I just read some things that said, like Dr. Fauci said, that children should be vaccinated by the end of the spring, beginning of summer. I'm just curious what that information that you were given is.
Probably the same sources that you're reading, which is the national press. And the most recent article that I read was in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago that went through in great detail what was required to get that up and running. So if that's shifted, I will be delighted. But it's at that point, the best projection that that reporter could make based on the information that he had was sometime in the summer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wattenberg.
Hi, Deputy Mayor. Great to see you here. So going back to something you said right up front about how we don't know what world we're in. I mean, this stuff about the new variants coming on. One of the new headlines today was the biggest spreaders actually are the people from 20 to 45, meaning lots of our teachers. So I feel like we could be in a situation very similar to what we're in, certainly for next term, which I really had hoped would not be the case, certainly for the summer, and I pray not for the fall, but I guess we can't rule it out yet. So with that, there's two things I want to raise. One is, it seems to me, given that long runway, that we should really be looking at this outdoor education in a much, much bigger way than we are. Because if we really want people to come back and to come back comfortably, we could be doing a lot of this outside. I mean, I think of outside as two different things. One is options for children to come back and they can have an outside story with their teacher. They can do a physical activity. So it's more SEL, but you could also be setting up tents and places and people could really be having outdoor schools. And I think that may not have been really worth the effort back in the fall, but man, if we're doing this through the summer and into the fall, I really think we need to look at it. So I want to say that. The other one I want to raise is with the tutoring. You're right. We had this great session on that. And there's all these articles now on it. You're talking about it. My guess is something's going to come out of the administration around these tutoring programs, these high dosage tutoring programs. And on the one hand, I'm thrilled. Tutoring is such a great way to approach these things. A little concerned about the faith that those groups had in untrained people, but put that aside. What I am worried about is, or not worried about, but I really would like for us to be able to connect that to sort of a knowledge building curriculum. So it's not just the reading. And I wonder if maybe in DC, where you sort of have some ability to pull people together, there could be some effort to connect some of this tutoring in the reading I'm talking about with some of the really high quality knowledge building curriculum that have been developed over time, so that we're really building both things at once and focusing on this well-rounded. So that's my question.
Yeah, it's an interesting observation, with Ruth, and I think obviously worth considering and exploring. My read of the kind of high dosage tutoring evidence, which will not nearly have been as deep as some of yours, and certainly your panel discussion that you had, is that it's extremely effective when embedded in schools and conducted by people, and certainly an organization that knows students and their needs, and that it is really effective when you're focused on specific skill building activities. So tutoring that's focused on specific aspects of math instruction and also literacy, following the kind of science of learning methods. I think your question goes to something bigger, which is this an opportunity as we consider promoting more widespread tutoring across the city? Could we couple it with something else? And I think there it would just be a question about almost the logistical trade-off of whether it's going to be hard enough to get the sort of the subject specific and skill specific tutoring stood up, and can we couple it with something else? But I guess my final thought on that is just, we believe it's going to be best embedded at schools that will make those kinds of decisions for their own students. And so it's not the case that we're talking about an army of untrained people that are just volunteering some of their time to sort of help young people, and that's happening in some kind of isolation, but rather this is in the first instance should be embedded in programs that know the young people. And so I think that's a thought on that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chang.
Thank you. I will dive right in. I'm curious what variables you're monitoring to assess how the school reopening is going so far.
And by school reopening, what do you mean, Mr. Chang?
February 1st.
Oh, for DCPS? Mm-hmm. What variables we're monitoring to know how it's going?
Yes.
Well, we're interested to know who's showing up. We're interested to know what the students are saying about their experiences. So at this point, we're extremely excited about the scheduled slots that we have available, and about the kind of enthusiastic reception that we've seen across the schools. But of course, we're interested to monitor in all those kind of logistical ways how it's going. Of course, as time progresses, we're assuming that students that are in person that we've identified as needing those services will do better and can tell us that they're doing better. So there'll be more as we move through the spring.
So, so looking at the demographic data of who's actually taking the spots and what they're saying about their experience, am I hearing that right?
You asked me how we're judging how it's going in terms of DCPS's reopening efforts. And what I'm sharing with you is that we are looking at the variables anyone would look at. So our teachers, staff, contractors in the buildings, are the students who are scheduled to be there, what is their attendance like? And then also understanding what they're telling us about their experiences.
I'm curious with that, right? What has your involvement been from your side with conversations with the teachers union, and how, where are you in this versus what the chancellor is taking on?
What's your question about the teachers union, Mr. Chang?
My question would be around, their concerns around going back to school in person.
I think they've been very public about their concerns, so I don't think I have anything to add.
Okay. And so I think what I'm trying to make sense of is where your office is taking lead on that versus what the chancellor of DCPS is.
Yeah, I don't understand the question. Meaning collectively, we're working hard to ensure young people can go back into buildings. The teachers union has been very clear about their own perspective. We, as an administration, signed an MOA that had lots of health and safety protocols in it. The teachers union decided that there were some difficulties they thought with that. It was arbitrated. The administration, I think, managed to prove that the schools were safe and that we'd met the terms of the MOA, and that's where we are today.
And one more, I'm curious where public librarians and school librarians are fitting into the 6 different areas you mentioned. As you're thinking through sort of how to build a citywide strategy.
Well, I would say, if you mean specific to school librarians, they're an integral part to much of it because of their important work within schools. We also are lucky because we partner with the DC public libraries in all of these efforts. And if you think about our citywide tutoring and literacy promotion efforts, the libraries are strong partners and always have been. Currently, there are a couple libraries hosting learning hubs as they did over the summer to support this work, and we anticipate they will continue also.
I would love to see them be able to, I think they are well positioned to play a role in everything from, helping with high dosage tutoring and supporting schools if they're brought into the conversation. But I'd love to talk more with you about that.
Well, and I'll share with you also, again, in the first instance, we believe that tutoring is best done at schools. And so the schools themselves will be ensuring that their experts and the folks that are deeply engaged in those kind of tutorial services, which I anticipate will include librarians, will be part of that effort.
Great.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chang. Vice President Goodsoi.
Thank you so much, and welcome, and great to see you again, Deputy Mayor Kine. First, I just had a couple of thoughts about possible ways that the State Board might collaborate with your office. I'm really excited to hear you talk about how this needs to be a collective effort. And I was just thinking that perhaps we could meet with you, and by we, it could be the board, or it could be President Parker and I, but just to sort of talk about what that looks like, you know, and work together towards that, because I know it's been hard, right, with the reopening. And so that's something that we would really love to play a bigger role in, is just coming to an understanding of what collective looks like. The other thing I was really excited to hear you front with is just the paying attention to the whole child and talking about meeting the needs of, you know, students' social emotional states that they're going to be returning with, and their mental health. One thing that I guess this is kind of building on what Representative Wattenberg talked about is just enrichment in general. And I think, you know, what I am hearing from a lot of families, not just in my ward, but across the city, is a need for getting outside, for enriching curriculum inside and outside, but especially away from the screen, right? And so one thing that I think we are maybe not taking advantage of, that hopefully we can, is there are a lot of outdoor education organizations that have been partnering with DCPS and that have been cut. You know, Food Prints is one of them, but there are many others as well. And if we restore funding and maybe expand funding, they could really help us with, you know, if not term 4, then at least summer, looking ahead to the next school year. So that's something I would really encourage looking at. And I did have one question. Oh, just about, you mentioned DPR in the summer, maybe participating in the tutoring piece of this. I was just wondering, you know, based on last summer, when I know there were some issues around attendance for the enrichment, like the summer enrichment, I think they didn't get as high attendance as they expected. And so I was also excited to hear you say that they will be going to the students more. Will that include enrichment as well, like regular summer programming that DPR does?
Yes. So on DPR, I'm just thinking about the wealth of commentary there. But let me just take your last comment or observation on DPR. Yes. So DPR actually had a very successful last summer, both with its virtual programming and its in-person activities that were sort of more traditional camps. And in addition, they did provide some learning hub settings. And it was in those learning hub settings that the attendance wasn't as high as we had anticipated. And again, that was some good learning for us, meaning in the summertime, it turned out that students didn't want to come in and sit in front of a computer and do their tutorials by itself, if you will. And so our thought this year is to flip that and to basically say, as you sign up for all this exciting enrichment programming that DPR does so well, we will, in some instances, we hope, be able to complement that with some academic support if you need it. And so the idea is to flip it, I think, in a way that you're suggesting would be good.
Thank you. And I know my time is up, but I will just say that we do know, just on an equity note, that families who can are paying for that kind of enrichment. And so I just really want to make sure that all families have access to that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. President Parker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, I have a few quick technical questions, then I'm going to elevate a question from the YouTube chat. So Following up on Dr. Reed's question around your youth safety focus, it seemed to me that you were suggesting using federal funds for some of those initiatives. Am I hearing that right? Yes or no, or if you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I'll very briefly elaborate. My comment on federal funds is not that it will necessarily be deployed for a specific purpose, but rather that we are very fortunate to be getting stimulus funds that can help us with all of this recovery and healing effort. So specifically schools that are getting this ESSER 2 funding will be able to allocate that for their own reopening and recovery work, which could include social and emotional learning supports. It could include additional mental health supports. It could include the tutorial supports that we're talking about, and so on. So my point is that we understand that will be deployed for many of those uses depending on the school.
Quick follow-up question there. That is very clear, the flexibility, and I think that makes sense in terms of the LEAs. Will OSSI or the Deputy Mayor's office have a pot of funds that it too can use to support these initiatives, like the Youth Safety Project?
Yes, so from the federal perspective, OSSI does have some additional supplemental federal funds, as it did in the first round, which it can deploy flexibly in specific ways. When you do the math, it turns out to be it's not very much money compared to what's going to schools, particularly if you're trying to do things like ensure that schools that receive Title I are getting their ESSER 2 fundings, but there are schools that don't get that. And so if as a city, we try to ensure that all schools get some of the federal funding, plus if we're trying to ensure that childcare actually receives some additional funding and so on and so forth, what's left over is not very much. Out of the last round, we used it to increase the one's presence in a couple of schools, as I mentioned. So I'm hoping we'll be able to do something else like that.
Understood. And just to underscore that point and to move on, I too have heard a lot of people support the expansion of the one's office, violence interrupters, et cetera. So I would encourage you to look into that, as it sounds like you're already doing. You mentioned supporting virtual learning, perhaps through providing virtual coaching, which I think is an amazing idea. Would that come at a cost to schools, or would that be a service paid for by OSSI, for instance?
Well, at this point, as I'm sure you're aware, many LEAs and schools are actually providing that already to their teachers. My point there is to say we think that that's a really exciting and promising idea, again, for educators that want it and say that they need it. OSSI does have a professional development budget. It does deploy trainings for schools and teachers. And so we're looking at ways that we might be able to provide some supplemental supports as educators say that they want it in those ways. So that is something that potentially could be central. We're not sure yet, but we're looking at it.
Great. Just one other point, you talked about accelerating credit attainment. I've heard from our student advisory committee, as well as students in Ward 5, that community service hours requirement continues to serve as a barrier towards graduation. And so just wanting to put that on your radar. I will use my last 30 seconds to elevate these questions, and hopefully you can tackle them. And I really appreciate your time tonight. One question from a guest on YouTube said, what is the city doing to ensure homeless students have the materials, for instance, laptops, internet service, in order to actively engage in learning? And then I do want to elevate a question of my colleague, Representative Thompson, about what demographic data for students are we utilizing for in-person learning? And I will let her expound on that, because I'm not sure I'm clear on the question.
Should I take the homeless?
Yes, quickly take that, and then I will let Representative Thompson frame her question and close. And thank you all for your flexibility here.
Thanks. So for our students who are experiencing homelessness, we've done a number of things. So certainly through their schools, the schools to which they're assigned, we have ensured that they were near first in line for the devices that we were giving out. This is just through the LEAs. Secondly, students experiencing homelessness were included in the list of students that were offered in-person opportunities, both initially through the CARES classrooms at DCPS, and now through the in-person learning opportunities. So students experiencing homelessness has always been a priority. Of course, DHS as a trusted and strong partner of public schools and public education has also, through its own outreach, shelter work, and the provision of temporary housing, worked to ensure that there's access to internet and devices available for students who are part of their services as well.
Thank you for that. And if we could use one extra minute, Representative Thompson, I do want to get to your question, and then Deputy Mayor, if you could answer it and then close with us. We really appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate the additional time. And I guess that kind of piggybacks on what Representative Chang was trying to get to. We've heard a lot from the city about in-person learning really being in service of equity, which I think is the right thing for it to be in service of. But we don't have great data on like who is actually taking advantage of the seats. Right now, we can see a ward breakdown of where students attend school, which gives us some hints. But it doesn't actually line up with any of the categories that the city's put forth around at risk or SPED. And so I would be curious to know what could be shared with the board around who actually is being able to take, who actually has taken advantage of in-person learning at this point.
Yeah, that's a very, very important question, Ms. Thompson. And I unfortunately don't have the numbers here with me tonight. I'm working with the chancellor so that we can figure out how to communicate who is taking advantage of these seats, because obviously that's something that we all want to know and understand. I will share that our focus has squarely been on equity. It has been from the beginning. I have personally been pounding the table to ensure that students who need it the most get access to these opportunities. I will also share that another important guiding principle for us has always been the option of taking advantage of it versus mandating it. And so we do have a number of families who've been invited, who've declined for their own reasons. And of course, they have every right to do that. So we are working to provide opportunity on an equitable basis and then leaving it entirely up to families and students about whether they want to take advantage of it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for coming and sharing with us. I do know that other members have remaining questions. I've received some from Representative Wattenberg, Representative Patterson, and others. If it's okay, we would like to compile those questions and share them with your office in hopes that you can get back with us. But again, thank you for all that you're doing for our students and joining us tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. I see my friend and colleague, Dr. Gibson Hubbard, your former colleague there. So I will not detain you any further other than to say thank you for the good conversation. And again, I wanted to share with you, we are really looking for these kinds of good ideas and, your advice on what we should be pursuing, what you're hearing from your constituents and your residents really makes a huge difference. So as you've got them, as you think about them, as you have insights to pass along, my door is always open for that. So please continue to do so. I would be grateful.
Thank you. We are now going to turn to Dr. Faith Gibson Hubbard, and I'm sorry that I'm smiling so hard. It's in part because I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Gibson Hubbard back to the state board. In many ways, the house that she helped to build, but that she's also a Ward 5 resident. And so in that respect, I'm partial. Dr. Gibson Hubbard will share with us tonight about her office's work and the annual report that they recently put out, and we'll entertain questions from members. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to you.
Well, good afternoon or good evening. I feel like all the days and times are starting to run together for me. I am excited to follow my colleague, who is the Deputy Mayor for Education. I'm also excited to be one of those DCPS parents that is sending my child back to school. So I just want to put a plug for that we did. Well, he made the decision to go back to school as we gave him that choice, which was the only the right thing to do. And so I just wanted to share that. Once I can get my life together here and actually move this. Oh, okay, there we go. Here we go. So I'm excited to be back. I was at the State Board of Education for quite some time, and was also excited to take on this role with Thrive by Five, and excited to be here with each of you all tonight, as I'm friends with many of you and colleagues. And so I feel like I'm in really great company, and just all around excited. So I did share in advance of meeting you here today, Thrive by Five's annual report. So I hope you had a little bit of time to review it. I know it was great, riveting reading. And so I hope that you were really able to get into it. Hopefully for many of you who have read my Office of the Student Advocate reports in the past, it was much lighter. So hopefully you were able to digest it in a different kind of way, as this was a much shorter report. So just to share a little bit more about Thrive by Five. So Thrive by Five is an initiative of the mayor's that was actually started in May of 2017. And it was originally started as a website that had the hopes of really putting into one place all of the resources and supports that families who had children 0 to 5 could go to and figure out how to access these different resources and supports. We've always been a very resource-rich city, but getting people to resources was a challenge. I remember accessing it myself back in 2017 as I have young children, and it was okay. But I think that the mayor realized that she needed to do more. And so in 2019, the mayor did appoint me to be the first executive director of Thrive by Five, and to work to establish an office that could ensure that all stakeholders, not just through a website, but in a variety of different ways, had knowledge of and access to the plethora of resources that we have in the District of Columbia, both internal to government and external, but that also we would work on fostering and nurturing collaborative relationships in order to build capacity, remove barriers, and just really the awareness that resources are there, and to put the power and advocacy back in the place where it should be, which is with families. So our mission in Thrive by Five is to work in partnership to create the best possible start for the district's children. And this is by not only connecting families to resources, but also making sure that we connect that with our belief, which is to work together across the district. And I know for many of you, there are lots of resources, but they're not always together. There are lots of programs, but things don't always really flow together. But we want to make sure that they do. And in doing that together, we absolutely can make sure that children have the best start and are really on the track to lifelong success for themselves and their families. So in our report, we break out what's really important to us, and collaboration is at the top of that. Our work requires authentic partnership and collaboration within government and communities, because we know that collectively we can uncover all the things that families actually probably don't even need to uncover. We could just look on the surface at all the things that families have told us that they need to be healthy, happy, and whole. And so we know that it takes not only looking at the health of our young district residents, but also making sure that as we look at the health and education options, that we're also making sure that as we remove these barriers and make sure that there's access, that we are focused on equity, awareness, access, and sustainable solutions. We have lots of temporary band-aids we put on things, but how can we move towards more sustainable? In our short time of operation, since I started in this role in April of 2019, we've had a broad range of engagement, and you can see the different types of engagement that we have had here, from calls, in-person meetings are the most, virtual meetings since we switched to this posture. But since our time of starting and really gearing up in May of 2019, we've been in contact with more than 19,000 contacts. And I think that just speaks to how important it is to really get out there, hear from people, and to work in partnership and collectively together. So just some evidence of our work. One of the biggest pieces of evidence is actually our website. So when I started in April of 2019, the website was terrible. I absolutely did not want to refer anyone to it because no one had been paying attention to it. And so Tiffany Wilson, who is my partner in this work, came over with me from the Office of the Student Advocate and really helped me to be able to build out this website in a phenomenal way so that we could really streamline the different resources, continue to reach out into the community and say, hey, what's here, what's not here? Where should we have additional resources? And so I'm really proud to say that the website has come together quite nicely. And I invite you to check out the website and to refer people to the website. And also if there are resources that are missing, to also let us know. They're broken up into resources for families, resources for providers, and also other relevant resources right now around coronavirus and other resources. We also have resources there about some safe sleep work that we're doing. So there are resources around safe sleep and safe sleep practices and programs. We do not create programs. We want to amplify and highlight the ones that are going. So once again, if you see something that's missing, please feel free to let me know, as we want this to continue to be a really robust resource. We are also responsible for the Mayor's Maternal and Infant Health Initiative, and probably the one thing that people know the most, which is the Maternal and Infant Health Summit. So the Mayor's Maternal and Infant Health Summit actually started in 2018, and it was to talk about the findings that we had seen in the District of Columbia around perinatal health, really for about a 6 to 8 year period prior to that report being published. And that perinatal health report is available on DC Health's website, but that was really the focus around the first summit. In 2019, when I came into my role, I thankfully had a really great summit to build from, but we worked in partnership immediately with community to say, what did you like? What didn't you like? How can we change things in order to make it feel not just like we're talking to practitioners, but also how do community members and community organizations want to show up? So in 2019, we did host the first summit that Thrive by Five put on in partnership with many other agencies and organizations, where we looked at the narratives of moms, babies, and families. And so you can see the panel discussions that happened that were on the main stage, but we also added breakout sessions that year. And we had the 5 stage panels, the 10 breakout sessions, and also a really large health and education expo. And it was really well attended. We had close to 1,300 participants, and that was inside of the convention center. But then, last year we all went home and packed it up and had to be virtual. But, the issues around maternal and infant health and so many other things don't go away. And so this required us to rethink our perspectives and retool our actions around thinking about maternal and infant well-being, but really across the life course. And so this past September, we had another maternal and infant health summit. We hosted it virtually. We used YouTube, we used the Mayor's Channel 16. We worked with a variety of community partners to ensure that they would also send the link out to their stakeholders, and that at certain doctors' offices and federally qualified health centers, they would stream it live for people who were there. And it was wildly successful. We were able to have well over 6,000 participants this year. People were able to be reached in places where they maybe have never been able to access content before from their smartphone, or to feel like they could be connected, and still were able to do the panels, the breakout sessions, and also connect people to vital community resources. So I'm really proud of the job that we were able to do last year with the summit. And I'm also excited that people can still connect to those resources through Thrive by Five's website, or even the Thrive by Five YouTube page. So the Maternal and Infant Health Summit is a really important component of the Maternal and Infant Health Initiative, but I always like to think about the Maternal and Infant Health Summit as like our annual pep rally. But we know that all year long, things are happening around maternal and infant health and also early learning. And so we want to make sure that people are able to stay connected to those resources and happenings. So on the Mayor's dcmaternalhealth.com website, you can find all the resources also in the maternal and infant health space. You can find the media from all the different discussions we've had on Maternal Mondays, which happens every first Monday of the month, on the Mayor's Facebook page, where we talk about a variety of different topics, and all the summit footage from the last 3 years, as well as all these different resources, and continue to connect in ways that are really meaningful to residents, so that we can work, again, collaboratively to come up with positive solutions forward. Because as a Black mom of 2, I know that it wasn't easy to get to them. And I want the next mom to have an easier experience than I did. So please refer people there. So the last big component that I'll talk to you about from Thrive by Five's work is the Thrive by Five Coordinating Council. And this is a mayoral appointed coordinating council through the Mayor's Office on Talent and Appointments, which does have a variety of both public, organizational, government members, as well as parent members. We have 8 parent members on the Thrive by 5 Coordinating Council. We also have a variety of community organizations that are represented and government agencies. And it was launched in November of 2019 in order for us to work strategically in certain priority areas to once again say, well, if we want to have the best start, where are the gaps? Where are the issue areas? How can we work in a more systemic way in order to move forward towards a better space? And so we have organized ourselves actually, not only as a large coordinating council, but in 3 subcommittees, one around systems navigation, maternal health, and then the last around early learning and development. And so our responsibilities are to track and report what we're seeing, look at programmatic things that are happening, other policy recommendations that have moved forward, many that I know you've had here before you previously, such as the Birth to 3 for All, and other recommendations like that, childcare. But how can we work to coordinate our efforts and streamline actions? And it's interesting that we said that in 2019 because 2020 gave us the real demonstration opportunity to know that we're going to have to do that from a fiscal perspective. But also as we're doing all of that, how can we identify gaps and opportunities to move us forward? So the report that you read was not only a report about Thrive by 5 and how we stood up the office, but also from recommendations from the Coordinating Council. So there are several recommendations. I'm not going to read them off. I want to be able to get to any questions you might have, but you can see that they really fall along the lines of things that you already know. A need for understanding how to navigate systems, so a systems level map, creating strategic partnerships in order to support certain issues for families around literacy, language access, and also to reduce confusion and burden on families around things that we ask them for, data in order to participate in programs and to amplify current programs. So you can see those recommendations under systems navigation. Under maternal health, you can see here that we wanted to work on the expansion of programs that we know are working. And some of this you can also see as, the council is also moving forward certain legislation as well, but around programs that are working for centering, doula care, home visits, et cetera, to work within the Department of Healthcare Finance to make sure that they have all their members aware. And this is our Medicaid agency, but to make sure that families who receive Medicaid are aware of telehealth supports and other parenting supports that they can receive. To make sure that within the maternal and infant health initiative work that we are really focused on identifying these issues and additional funding in the perinatal health space. Maybe the money isn't in the health cluster, but maybe it's somewhere else. And how can we work together in order to make sure that we're focused on perinatal health? This number 4 right here is really important to me because this speaks to probably work that you all see even later. So ensuring that birthing hospitals, as they are giving parents a lot of information about a lot of things they need to do, breastfeeding, how to get the birth certificate, you can sign up from Books from Birth. The other thing that's really important is also letting parents know about things that might be coming down the road. So giving them information about developmental milestones and access to where to go for early interventions. They should know about Strong Start and early stages long before they need those resources to be a resource to others. We want to also continue to identify strategies that are available to meet the unique needs of families. Not every family needs the same particular package of transportation or childcare, but we want to make sure that we continue to be agile around what families need. So what are those strategies that we can do that? And then also being aware that perinatal mood disorders and maternal mental health is an issue area, as mental health is in many spaces. So being aware there as well. And then lastly, just I'll leave you with the early learning and development recommendations. So to partner with agencies to increase utilization of screening and evaluation services of children who are suspected of developmental delays. So this is really ties to what I was just talking about just earlier, making sure that families know even more, because we see an underrepresentation of children receiving early intervention services. And we know that early intervention is critical. You can see even more success for the latter times if families know about that. To partner with OSSI around childcare, access and affordability and quality. And I'm sure you probably have lots of thoughts there. To also work with childcare centers and homes to ensure that they are aware of the other services that they can share with families. and to also advocate for increased awareness and access of behavioral health and mental health services. So just lastly, you can see here, what are some of the things that we're focused on right now? So I mentioned the safe sleep education work that we're doing. We are in partnership right now with NIH and the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, and we've convened a very large advisory group around creating a citywide safe sleep campaign. There's lots of safe sleep work going on, but it's not interconnected, and we are still seeing infant-related deaths associated with lack of safe sleep spaces. To highlight community resources so that people who are providing direct services can get them in the hands of people and in the minds of people to know that they're available. We need to also make sure that while we're thinking about a lot of other things with childcare is a critical service, but they're also businesses. And so how can we support them as small businesses, and also to remove the thought that children need to be in these spaces so that families can go to work, but also that they are great foundational supports, educational foundational supports for young children. We want to make sure that that is also at the forefront, how important it is for young children. We want to make sure to promote gender inclusivity in our maternal and infant health work. Not everybody identifies as a mother, but there are pregnant persons. And so how can we be even more open to that? Expanding our perinatal health resources, and you can see that here. And then lastly, something that you just touched on, which is to explore the impact of violence and trauma on the health and well-being of young children. So we have partnered with Cure the Streets and the ONE's office, and then even the additional work that the mayor has going on now around gun violence, as we know that that's also something that you can't thrive by 5 if you're in a community that is dealing with significant trauma and violence. So I'm sure you don't need to stay connected. Many of you know how to find me anyways, but thank you so much for letting me take this time to share. So I'm going to stop my screen if that's okay, because I would love to see everyone's face. Okay, so that was what I had.
Thank you, Dr. Gibson Hubbard. Members, we are going to have 2-minute rounds because Dr. Gibson Hubbard is with us for about 30 minutes. And so as we did last time, please raise your hand and John Paul will call on members as he sees them. John Paul, I'm going to recommend that we start with Representative O'Leary. He does it the old-fashioned way, so I feel like he's at a disadvantage.
As you wish, Mr. President. Dr. O'Leary.
Yes, thank you for that fabulous presentation. It's great to see you again, and we are so proud of you.
Thank you.
I have a question that's sort of out of the ether, and I want you to think about it a little bit. What are the positive aspects that the pandemic has created for Thrive by 5?
I don't even need to think very long about it, actually. One of the positive aspects is that the virtual space has actually allowed us to be able to attend many more meetings, to hear about many, many more things going on. I can very easily, it's always been easy to like pick up the phone and talk to someone, but to go from one meeting to the next, and then I might miss something else. I don't know about something else that's going on. The virtual space has really helped us to be able to connect with more places to say, oh, you're doing that work? Well, so is so-and-so over there. Did you know that actually the aspects of your violence interruption work is really connected to what we're doing in the Family Success Centers and CFSA? I think it's given us the opportunity to really step back and not have to run around physically to a lot of meetings, but we can really convene with each other in much more meaningful ways. It also has allowed something that we've been saying a lot for quite a while since we started, that we need to work in a more coordinated fashion. I've always been used to being in offices where I had to eat ramen noodles, right? I ain't never have any money. So, I've always had to make up some stuff out of ramen noodles, add a bunch of stuff in, and it'd be a really great meal because I had to work with a lot of people in order to make things happen in the Office of the Student Advocate and also in Thrive by 5. I think a lot of our agencies and community partners are having to think about that as well. And so they're having conversations with people like me in Thrive by 5 around, well, who else is doing this work and how can we work collaboratively together? Where can we really go for the long haul together, as we know financial resources are going to be really constrained? So I think it's allowed us to be in community with many more people to build deeper and more intentional relationships, and move also to, I love the Mayor's Maternal and Infant Health Summit, but we do things around maternal and infant health all year long. it allows people to really connect with, let's not just think about the pet rally, which is a beautiful pet rally. And I work really hard, trust me, to make the pet rally come together. But there's lots of really great work going on. So we've been able to be a much more intentional community through this time.
That's great. That's great. That's what I was hoping you were going to say.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Mr. Patterson.
Thank you. And it's always great to see you, Dr. Hubbard. You're one of my
Always
favorite
good to see
people.
you as well,
You're
Brad.
one of my most favorite people to talk to about these things. Just real quickly, as far as representation, are there vacancies on the council at the current time? I know they go through MOTA and stuff like that. Do you currently have some vacancies at the current time on the council?
We do. I want to say that we actually are in need of 2 parent seats, and I don't want to say the wrong word, so I'll share that with you. But I think we need 2 additional parent representatives. But the one thing that I'm also happy about is that, you know, I love to push boundaries. For anybody who knows me, you know, I like to push a good boundary.
I do.
And so I've added some folks who aren't appointed because, you know, I didn't create the list of folks. I remember looking at the list and I was like, so I don't think these are all the right people. But okay, we're just gonna find a way around that, which I'm good for that. And so we've actually added just some additional people as ex officio members, you know, that they are also participating. I've asked them to come. They had just as much input on the annual report that we had and the recommendations, making sure that we're also vetting the recommendations within the community. So reaching out and going to other places. I spoke to a lot of groups before we even published the report to say, are these the right ones? Are we missing some? This year, I actually am interested in putting out more quarterly recommendations so that we can work towards those. And we'll also be working with other people who are not on the coordinating council in order to figure out ways to implement those.
Okay. And my last thing real quick, are you working with groups like East of the River Family Collaborative and, you know, those particular groups in particular?
Now, you know me, of course.
I just want to make sure. You know, I know some great people in those organizations and what they do, and I just want to make sure that connection is there.
Yeah, so the family collaboratives, even the other organizations that have really deep roots within communities, those are places where we went first. The health councils, the egg councils, the anything council, we're going to everything. And any other groups that you also recommend, I'm happy to meet with them as well. And we want to make sure to continue to make, you know, that's the way in which you can make your tentacles reach even more broadly. So those community groups are really critical because, once again, Thrive by 5 doesn't create programs. We want to amplify what's there and then also say from a strategic standpoint, how do we make this better work together so that, you know, we can have the kind of impact that families have told us that they wanted, but we're not doing that because people kind of want to be in their own sandbox. So I think working with those individual groups is really essential. But if there are other ones that you think we should be in touch with, please let me know.
Yeah, and I appreciate your answers. You know, I asked them just because, you know, I know you do work with these individuals, but I wanted people to know that you have been very invested in the community. So thank you for your work.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm also thankful to build off of the partnerships I've had in the past. You know, people trust me because of work I've done with them before, and that makes it a lot easier to get a foot in the door with some of the places.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sutter.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Gibson Hubbard. Nice to see you. Great presentation. I appreciate the focus on both the citywide sleep efforts, and I'm super excited to see the coordinated campaign on that. And on the focus on birthing, I had the chance to do a fellowship and work with a midwife east of the river and was utterly fascinated to learn all about the ways in which our system doesn't adequately support birthing people. And so really excited to see all that in your plan. I have a question about how the state board can best get involved with this. OSSI has clear interest in working with childcare and early childhood settings, and it's not a topic that we have prioritized during my 2 years on the board. So I'd love to learn how we can best help.
So thank you for that question. It's always great to see you. Opportunity, achievement, belief gaps, they all start before kids get in school. They start in, you know, the fact that families are dealing with a lot of stress and so many other things before children even get into childcare. So just in birthing them, I think about, I had all the luxuries in the world, but you know, when your baby's inside of you, there's a lot of things that happen even from that point Then when you get into childcare, depending on the quality and also just the resources that even those childcare providers have at their disposal, also makes a difference in that child's trajectory when they get in school. I would love to see the state board continue to help us as a city push towards a comprehensive education system where we actually see childcare as a part of that continuum. My crusade at this moment, and the deputy mayor knows it, I don't know if he's gone now, but he knows it, is that I would like to see childcare more integrated into our thinking around our public education system. If we don't, we will not be able to get past the gaps that we see. You can call them whatever kind of gaps you want, but you see them continue to widen, but not start. They just widen when kids get into school and we actually start counting things, right? We start assessing them on things and we see that. I'll never forget when my son started school, his teacher was like, when he started pre-K 3, she was like, where did he go to childcare? She said, because he doesn't nap, but he knew how to sit on the mat. He went over and picked up a book. He was like, so I'm not going to take a nap. I'm going to sit here. And he did it. Those are all the kind of norms and things that we want all of our children to be able to have. Maybe not that, because everybody has their own thing. But we want children to be prepared for even going into these early learning environments that we have. And you can only do that, when you start to see that connect. DCPS is doing some of that this year. Cheryl Olson, who I don't know if you've had her come here and talk to you, but who's over there early learning for DCPS. She is really trying to do a lot of courses in order to help parents understand what to expect. And we've also started talking about some streamlined professional development between child care professionals and pre-K teachers. That will be the start for bridging the gap, but also helping families know what are some of the things we could be working on at home with. Like when my 2-year-old comes home, I kind of look at her, she tells me what she wants to do, but I would love to have more of a roadmap to help her too, right? Yeah. All parents want that. So we need closer connections. So pushing in your bully pulpit right here to make us think about that more and to be a thought partner in helping us do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, I have gotten a note that I need to stick closer to the time limit. So don't be mad at me when I have to cut people off. And Dr. Gibson, Hubbard, and I apologize if I have to do it to you too. Dr. Reed.
All righty, cut me off, John Paul. So pleasure to meet you virtually, Dr. Gibson Hubbard. I was actually at OSCE when the Thrive by 5 website rolled out across 3 desks, and it's good to see the growth. So I guess my question is, I have a couple questions. What does your collaboration look like with initiatives like Help Me Grow, Child Care Resources and Referral, and the Quality Improvement Network? And then what differentiates you or your office from that work? And then my second piece is, what is your, I guess as an agency's role in fully funding like the Birth to 3 Act? The Deputy Mayor was talking about seats and access for childcare centers that are private paying, and I know part of that act has some remedy for that. So there you go.
Okay, so those are all programs. Help Me Grow, all the things that you mentioned. Those are programs. My role is really from a policy, strategic, collaborative liaison role. So I work with all those people that you just mentioned in order to say, what are we doing in our work? And if you're not being as effective as you can be over here, or maybe you are, maybe your program is really effective in one small spot, but it could also be effective if you worked collaboratively with this other person. So we think from a systems level together. We do not do direct programming. So you may want to think about it in more of like a policy aspect is what Thrive by 5 is responsible for, and also community engagement perspective. With the Birth to 3 for All and fully funding, I would first say, let's actually look at the things that we really do fund. Many of the things that are already in the Birth to 3 for All are actually things that are funded at some level, right? But I think that when the legislation was crafted, you not only have to talk within the community, but you also have to talk to the agencies that are implementing things. Because a lot of times there's duplication and also makes it seem as if things are not in play if we don't have those discussions. So I would say that right now, in order to make sure that we're fully funding, whatever that is, that we have to see what's actually happening in the agencies because some things are functional. And then also make sure that we pull back and say, what are the other supports we need now that COVID has really changed a lot of the landscape of what we said we wanted out of that legislation and law.
Thank you very much. Ms. Thompson.
I feel weird calling you Dr. Gibson Hubbard, but I'm gonna do it because I'm supposed to. I have a question about kind of how to help with something you said. So you mentioned hospitals give, new parents so much information. And then you said it would be awesome if they could also share information about early stages and Strong Start. And I've seen even during the pandemic, their continuity of services has been impressive to families. So I definitely think they're a value. What would it take to actually make that happen?
Talking to the birthing hospitals. So last week I presented, I'm a part of, DC Health has just funded a perinatal quality collaborative. We have so many things going on. See, that's why we gotta do some more things. But thankfully I'm in a lot of spaces. So I presented to them, same presentation, but I really focused in on some of the recommendations that actually birthing hospitals could do. And it's not a hard thing to do. While you might feel like you're inundated with a lot of resources right after that baby comes out, I know they gave me the packet. I'm like, I'm tired. I don't know what to do with this thing. But when I got to I did tap into that packet because I went back and I wanted to go get my child's birth certificate, and I had filled out the form and it told me where I'd given them the form at the hospital, but it gave me the directions as to where I need to go. While I'm going through that, if I also saw this about developmental milestones, I might say even a few months down the line, like, oh, I remember that sheet. Is my baby looking at me? Am I saying enough words during the day to my baby? What are some of the other things I could be doing? There are resources that you could go back to, but it's a really easy fix and something we did it for books from birth. Just ask the hospitals to do it. It's another copy that they put, or even something that they can put online as a resource that can go to families. And they just hadn't thought about it before.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to stop talking because I don't want to be told that I have to.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Parker.
Thank you again, Dr. Gibson Hubbard, for joining us. My question is around the barriers that you mentioned, in particular, not enough families or mothers having access to the resources that are available to them. And I wanted to know, to what extent have you or your office identified skepticism being a barrier? Just understanding now with the whole skepticism around the vaccine, and I know it's different, but I do imagine that there are members of our broader community that may not lean into some of these resources just because they're skeptical. I'm thinking of families that may be worried about ICE detainment, for instance. And so I guess if you could just talk to how you all are learning about that, addressing that, thinking about overcoming that barrier in particular.
So trust is always the biggest barrier. And I think you have to, once again, partner with people who have the trust. And there are a lot of health providers within the city, especially if you look at our federally qualified health centers. Like, I received my healthcare through Mary Center. They are a trusted entity. And so when you're trying to work with certain communities, if you're trying to talk about certain resources and you want them to be viable, I think that's where partnership really comes into play. If you're a new person, like Thrive by 5 is new. I'm not going to go into the community and just say, hey, trust me because I work for the mayor. That's not enough. I had to, thankfully, I knew a lot of the groups prior, so that was helpful. But I tethered myself to people who did have the trust. And I think we have to do that with other resources as well. We also have to help people feel that these are resources they deserve. I am deserving, right? And I think we also have to let people know that they are deserving of the resource. Sometimes we have turned it into something that we feel like, oh, we're doing this for you. No, we're not doing anything for you. You are deserving of this resource. You are deserving to have a baby in a respectful, dignified way and with the type of care you want. So I think it's also changing the way we talk about it. And the ways in which we say that families should be connecting with it in a trusting way through other trusting entities. So they deserve it.
Absolutely. I believe that concludes our questions, or do we have, no, yes, that concludes our questions. We have an additional question. Representative Weidenberg.
I'm sorry, I really just wanted to say hi to Faith.
Hi.
Welcome. It was great to hear from you. So that's all.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Me too. Good to see you.
It's good to see you as well.
Thank you so much.
Paul, thank you so much for making it happen. But it's always nice to come home, as I started something there too. So, and I know that the services are going really well, and just proud to still be connected with both Serena and Dan and the great work they're doing in both the Office of the Ombudsman and the Office of the Student Advocate. Just so proud and honored to have been connected with them and each of you. So thank you for this time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us and for all that you're doing.
All right. Bye-bye.
We are now going to continue on in our agenda, members. Next, we're going to entertain a brief discussion on outdoor learning. I'm going to turn it over to Vice President Gasoy to lead us in this discussion.
Thank you so much. And I have been meaning to do this for a long time, but this is advocacy in progress. So the first thing I want to do is try to get everybody sort of up to speed about what has been happening. And really, I guess, to clarify that the advocacy that the state board has done, so the letter that we wrote to the mayor and the resolution that we passed, is part of a larger effort. So I am going to share my screen and give you a brief overview. John Paul, can I share my screen? Okay, awesome. Of what has happened so far, just so that we can all be on the same page about where we are. And so if you have questions, I can't see everybody, but just speak up, because I can't see you, as I said here. I just want to get this on present. Okay, so I'm not going to go over all of these things, but I just wanted to give you a sense that this started back in July. And it started with individuals who came together to present a PowerPoint to Deputy Mayor Kine and Chancellor Farabee about what we saw as the benefits of outdoor education and how this might be rolled out in the fall or as out of school time. So it was not well formulated yet, but we shared that with them. They thought it was a good idea. And I don't know if you remember, I think Deputy Mayor Kine talked about at one of our meetings that they actually did visit private schools that were setting this up. So they were interested, they still are interested, but it just hasn't manifested yet. So that happened. And Power Ed sent out a survey, they got 450 responses. And there was positive feedback from teachers around coming back if there was an outdoor option. I can share that with you. And there was a petition in the summer, and it got 3,000 signatures within like a month. That is still something that we can use. We can reawaken it, but it really just kind of was something that got put out there in the summer to see what interest was, and there was a lot of interest. As you know, this has become an equity issue, because we started to realize that, as I've said over and over, families who can pay for this, right? And so we felt really strongly that this needed to be something that was available to students east of the river. We partnered with Friends of Oxen Run, and again presented to the deputy mayor and to DPR president or chair, Mr. Hunter, about partnering with Friends of Oxen Run. There are 5 schools within walking distance. And so the idea was it would be great if they could use that resource. So that the DPR is sort of informally helping with that effort. In fact, today there was an event and there was a good DPR presence apparently. But as I think you know, so far that's really been an out of school time, just organized with no funding, and just community partners helping out with that. But it's been really well attended, so there is interest, right? We, after putting that together, we decided to become a coalition. So we are the Coalition for Equitable Outdoor Education. There is, as of yesterday, a website. I'm not going to go there right now, but I can share that actually in the chat in a little bit. We did do a Ward 8 focus group, and there is a report based on that. And I'm going to share this whole, I put together a folder for us where all these resources can be found. Sorry, I don't know why this isn't advancing. Oopsie, shoot. Ah. Hold on one sec, guys. Sorry. Now you can see how messy my desktop is. There we go. Why is this acting weird? Okay, so this is where we fit in. We came in December and January, but there's been a lot of advocacy since then even. I've been in conversation with President Davis about possibly funding some pilots in wards 5, 7, and 8. And we're working with Foodprints in particular, who have partnerships with 15 schools. Some of them are hybrid, but they need more funding in order to really scale up those in-person experiences. And we're sort of identifying 3 schools that would be most interested in that. And the idea is that if there are pilots, I think one of the big barriers has been that even folks who realize this is a good idea, it's hard to wrap one's mind around what it would actually look like. And so if we have some pilots set up, then we can say, this is what it looks like. And so far, Bria has been the only example. And they're in Ward 4, and they have 2 pre-K classrooms, but we'd like to have sort of a full age range represented and maybe something a little more scaled up. So that is in progress. There was a lot of testimony at the council reopening, and since then, Scott Goldstein and I have followed up with individual council members to see if they might follow our lead, our being the state board, in writing to or signing a letter to the mayor asking for funding. And we have started to encourage schools that have expressed interest to put that in their term for reopening plan or continuing opening plan, so that the chancellor sees that there is interest. Because one thing that we heard him say at the council hearing was he'll support it if principals ask for it. So that's something that we're hoping will actually come to pass. And then finally, something that I recently joined is the Green Schoolyards initiative connected with cities connecting children to nature, which is starting now, a 3-year sort of long-term technical assistance initiative that is sort of promoting whole district and support of outdoor learning. So there's some funding, not much, but that's sort of a long-term goal. And the exciting part about that is that Principal Martin at Wilson High School has signed on to be the principal involved in that. There needed to be one principal, one city level official, and one organization. So I was the first one to sign on as the city person, but now we have also somebody from the Department of Energy, and we're looking to get more partners from different organizations, again, hopefully east of the river. So if you have ideas, that would be great. One of the things that we've talked about a lot is that bringing together the partnering organizations has been really important and pivotal. So I just wanted to share with you some of them who have joined the coalition and are, some of them really actively involved, some sort of just give expert, advice at times. And DPR, again, I said is, it's informal, but there are several members who are on our email chain and have come to events. So it's a growing list, and they are really pivotal, and I'll talk more about this in a minute. One of the things that we did is we gathered them together and had them help us come up with a tool So this is, hold on one sec. Oh, I think this is out of order. So this is the first page of the tool. And this is intended to help schools plan for what they have interest in and have capacity for. So there's 2 pages. This is just one to give you an idea, but it helps them think about, would they want to have their staff be the ones to run this and they just need professional development, or some combination of like the partner comes and brings the programming and also partners, or just bring it and do it. Is this something you want for all grade bands or just for your second grade? So that kind level of like help schools think through what it is. And then part of this tool is an overview of partner organizations that can help you do this, whatever this is for you, right? So it's really taking into account that every school is going to need to tailor this to their needs. And these are some of the schools I've started to organize who's interested in what stage we are in terms of supporting them. We have about 30 schools now. So this again is just, a small thing. We don't, Alistair, have anything in Ward 2 yet? So we can work on that. But this is really the important slide, I think. What you've all been waiting for is, what should we do as a state board? And one thing I just want to say that's exciting to me is that, as I talked about when I was talking about the role of resolutions, I think this is the first time that a resolution has really led to very active, direct advocacy, and so maybe this is something, maybe it's a fluke, or maybe this is kind of something that we do more going forward. But so I have 3 main steps outlined here. One is to educate yourself and really find your own voice in this advocacy, if that's, if you are feeling like, yes, I want to do more. So I am just actually going to link to one of the best resources actually for doing that is this website, which is the Green Schoolyard America site. And one of a great place to start is with their resources. They have case studies, so you can see what this looks like in other districts, other cities, places that are colder than it is here. But it's just a really strong resource. The other thing that I have set up is our own folder. So I will just share that with you in the chat. And what I recommend is that you create a shortcut to it so that you have access to it and you can also add to it. But this is another good source for you. It's just a 1-pager. It's also a good thing to share if you want to. So it's sort of the 1-pager of, an FAQ of or the overview of why this is important, and then the FAQ of what about weather? All the things that you'll hear over and over again, and how to respond to it. So educate yourself. And then the next one is, reaching out to schools in your ward. I'm going to share that document with you so you can see which ones we already have connected with. Alistair?
Thank you, Representative Gassoy. This is super helpful. I think one thing that would be helpful for those of us who haven't been as engaged as you have been in this is who, I think part of it is understanding who to advocate to, and who needs to be convinced. Is it if principals want to do this, then it's done, or is it about which layer of advocacy are we? Would be most important, and what stage are we at?
Yeah, so I think this is why it's a little bit difficult to, or why I've had a hard time sort of directing you, is because there are multiple avenues at this point. So I think part of it is responding to schools that are interested and connecting them to resources. that exist. So one of them, and I'll just skip to this now, is one of the only partners that actually has funding to do this now is DC Scores. They bring the funding, and they work with 50 schools, I just learned, in almost every ward except yours. I'm sorry. They're not in 2 and 3. But they are going to reach out to every principal that they already partner with and ask, what do you want us to do in term 4 and beyond? Because they can't do their regular programming. They can't do soccer, which is what they normally do. They do also normally do poetry, and they are planning to do that outdoors.
So that's for schools that want to do it already.
For schools that want to do it already. So that's one thing, is like helping to connect them to resources. I think another piece of this is reaching out, again, if you feel comfortable and sort of have educated yourself enough about it, to schools to suggest that this is something they might be interested in, giving them the information. That might mean reaching out to the LSAT chair, or to, if you have a good connection with the principal, you know, after we get out of the first week of term 1 or 3, sorry, maybe reaching out to them, or just kind of gauging interest with parents that you have connections with at your, you know, reading time. Is this something that you could imagine doing during school time? And do you think that your school community would have appetite for this? If so, do you want to set up a conversation? And this is kind of what I've done in my ward and in some of your wards, is just, you know, either followed up with somebody who testified, or somebody heard a news story after our letter was published and reached out to me, and I met with the LSAT, you know. So it happens in different ways, but you can be proactive, you can be reactive. And then the other piece of this, I think, is continuing to try to find, it's sort of like a dual strategy. I think we should keep trying to get system level support, because without that, I think this is going to remain sort of little bright spots around the city, you know, and it won't be equitably accessible. But I also have been looking for alternatives. As I mentioned, you know, WTU will hopefully fund some pilots. I've talked to some private funders. DC Scores comes with funding. So if we can find more partners like that, that would be great. Does that answer your question? Okay. I saw Ebony Rose's hand next.
Yeah, thank you for this, Representative Gasoy. I guess I'm curious. I know that partnerships find their ways into schools a bunch of different ways. There's no straight line to how to partner with the school. I'm curious to know a little bit more about what it means when a school expresses interest. Like, does that mean like the principal has signed on? Does that mean that a partner in the building is saying like, I want to do this? Does it mean somebody from the community? And is there is there a perfect, like if it was a perfect world, who do you need in the school communities to support this?
So to the first 3 questions, yes to all of them. You know, it has come from all of those folks. So for instance, at Wilson, it really has been the principal who has been exploring this. And, you know, she is working on buy-in from her school community. I think that's true in some other schools as well. At Minor, I spoke with the principal. It came from actually Patricia Stamper, who has talked to us many times, and she works there. But then she connected me directly with Principal Jackson. And then he's also sort of checking the buy-in from the community. In Ward 1, it really has come from the parents. And so that's where, you know, it started with the parents, and then some principals actually reached out to me and said, you need to come to the LSAT meeting because this is becoming, you know, a thing, and we need you to answer these questions. But I think to answer your last question, which is the most important, there needs to be buy-in, right, from the school community in general. And so that is the purpose of that tool that we give schools, is to help them sort of work through that. So for instance, at Bancroft in Ward 1, they have different parent and teacher teams working on this to figure out different options that they might try. And they're still in progress with that. And with the food print schools, like they already have infrastructure and they've built trust already. And so for them, it's really the food prints partners, and this is true of DC Scores too. It's a slightly different model, but where it's really the partner who's kind of liaising with us, the coalition, and the school, and now with the WTU in some cases. For DC Scores, they actually like partner with teachers in the schools. So it really varies, and I'm just learning a lot as I go that there are a lot of possibilities, but I do understand why it's so complicated and why our system leaders are like, yeah, that's a layer that at this point feels really difficult. And so one thing I think we can do is try to make it easier. I kind of think of us as like, the bees that are pollinating this idea. It really needs that level of like going school to school and organization, like making those connections. My other metaphor is we have these partners who are like a legion of service vehicles and they need fuel. Right now they don't have fuel and the funding is the fuel. And if we could just, yeah.
My apologies to interrupt, Vice President Gasoy. I'm going to have to ask that we move ahead. I will let you finish your statement, but there are several members that need to jump from the meeting and we're already about 30 minutes behind. So if you could just wrap up, that would be great. I would ask members to follow up directly with Vice President Gasoy, as well as we can continue these conversations via email.
I'm going to share, I'll just in an email share all of this with you so you can look at the resources and let's just talk. I'm happy to talk on the phone or to just email with you. So these resources are there and I think we can decide going forward if we want to do things just individually or if there's more for the state board to do, as an agency. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
I really appreciate the work that you've put into this. Your leadership here has made believers out of many of us. So thank you again for that. We're going to quickly move on to the leadership report and the executive director report. I imagine these will be quick hits, and then we're going to get to the proposals around committees, process, and appointments before members have to jump. So for the leadership report, and I would just say this is going to be verbal tonight. My hope is that these will be written reports moving forward after tonight's meeting. For members of the public, the State Board of Education had an 8-hour-long retreat. And while that is certainly a lot of time, I can comfortably say I believe it was time well spent. And I would encourage members of the public to follow up with Representative Thompson for a very interesting Spotify playlist that will convey members' interest in music. Vice President Gasoy and I are setting up standing meetings with key stakeholders, for instance, OSSE, quarterly meetings, ideally with the Deputy Mayor, the Chancellor, and others. We will let you know when these meetings are, just giving you an advance notice, but the hope is that these will be reoccurring. At our next working session, I hope that we will be able to dig into the budget. It's budget season already, more in depth. And we know there's gonna need to be some level setting there. I did wanna just give you an update. The mayor's office asked all agencies to cut their budgets given everything that's going on with the pandemic. And our proposed cuts, fortunately, the mayor did not need to, or I shouldn't say the mayor, the mayor's office did not need to cut as severely as we had originally hoped. So we have about $10,000 more than we thought we would have for this current year. And so at our next working session, we will entertain ideas for how we should direct those funds, as well as begin thinking about the upcoming budget season. And then the last thing I have on the leadership report, I wanted to have John Paul kind of give an overview of where we are with our teacher survey. Given that he is then going to follow the executive director's report, I'm going to just ask that he merge that in his report. And so with that, we're going to turn it over to John Paul for the executive director's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, we did talk a little bit at the retreat about where we were in terms of the all teacher survey responses. I am happy to report that we have received over 1,000 responses to our survey, thanks in large part to your personal connections and personal reaching out to schools that had not yet participated, or using your social media and other things. It is really fantastic that we have that many responses, first of all. I can also say that the distribution for the responses that we got was pretty good, really. It is almost evenly distributed amongst wards of residence. It is largely balanced in terms of grade, and this goes from pre-K all the way through adult and non-traditional. We have about 20% of the group also teaches in sort of multiple grades in different places too. So that's really exciting to have. We have a pretty good balance in terms of racial responses as well, in terms of Black teachers, Latino teachers, and those types of things. Certainly it isn't exactly what our population is, but we think that the information that we have are very appropriate for the survey size that we have. So just to give you next steps, so our vendor, Resident Education, will be starting to analyze the data and providing some information related to starting to draft the final report on the information. I anticipate that there will probably be a number of meetings, or maybe at least 1 or 2 meetings with the contractor, and I will let you know if you want to participate in those, how to do that and when to do that, as soon as I know when they are. Otherwise, I just wanted to say thank you. I think the fact that we received so many responses from schools across the city is really, really important. And it really is going to be some really great information that we're able to gather from this survey. In terms of additional things for the executive director's report, I don't have a whole lot of things. We do have our performance oversight hearing coming up. If that has not already been on your calendar, it should be. Please make sure that you have that date. If not, I will send a reminder for all of you. The testimony for that hearing is the president. It is not necessarily something that you as individual board members need to sign up for, but if you can watch, that would be great, because there will be some interesting questions, I'm sure. Prior to the hearing, we do submit performance oversight question responses. We have received those questions. There are about 50 of them. And I am in the process right now of drafting the responses, and it will go out to board before it goes to the committee of the whole. The deadline for that is February 19th. So it is a fairly short deadline. So I am doing my best to try to get a draft done, to get it out to you, and go through all of the changes prior to that date. So please do be checking your emails for the review requested line in your email when I send out those performance things, because the likelihood is it will be a fairly short turnaround in terms of those. But I'm doing my best to try to get it out to you as quickly as I possibly can. And Mr. President, I think that's the last thing that really needs to be spoken of today.
Awesome, thank you. I would just like to underscore how awesome it is that we were able to get the survey out and get so many responses, even amid such confusion and stress with the pandemic. So thank you again for your advocacy there. Representative Wattenberg, you have a question?
Yeah, just a question on the performance oversight hearings. We don't testify, but is it not a place where we can encourage people to give public testimony about their experiences with the board? Is it helpful to do that?
That's a great question. Thank you. Yes, I mean, if you would like to let your constituents know when our performance oversight hearing is, it is a joint hearing with the Deputy Mayor for Education's office. So there will be limited opportunity for public comment, but anyone who has really nice things to say about the state board, we would love for you to sign up and provide testimony because it is really important for the committee of the whole and all of the council to hear about the work that we're doing. Certainly, if members of the public out there don't like the work that we're doing, I would like to hear that directly and not at a council hearing. But I'm fine with hearing it any way we can so that we can make sure that we're serving the residents better. That's a great question, Ruth. Thank you.
And my one other comment on that is, I believe tonight, if all goes as is in that memo, we're going to establish a committee that's around advocacy. And it would seem to me this could be a very initial thing for that committee to think about, is what's the right way to present there, and do some thinking about, you know, how to either ask us to ask people or have the leadership ask people, but somehow decide what to do and do it well.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson, I think you have a question. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just a clarifying question. Did they update the performance oversight list? Because at first they were talking about like one big hearing for everything education. And I know there were some council members who weighed in and were really supportive of adding additional dates.
I will get back to you on the specifics of that. I have not seen an updated list for the hearing schedule, but I will follow up with the board members on that.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we're going to move ahead to a discussion on proposed standing committees, process changes, as well as appointments to internal and external groups, if you will. I do want to just let members of the public know that Representative Sutter and I believe Representative Patterson will need to jump from the meeting after a while. They did notify us ahead of time because of conflicts. So with that, I am going to give a brief overview of the changes and then just open it up for discussion, questions, comment, etc. So earlier today, or I should say at that 8-hour retreat that that was mentioned a little while ago, we spent a great deal of time thinking about the state board's functions, its priorities, its structures, process, etc. One of the key proposals is around establishing standing committees. There would be 4 additional standing committees to the administrative committee. Those committees would be the Assessment and Accountability Committee. Largely or generally speaking, this committee would oversee the state board's work around DC's state accountability plan and report card. Another standing committee would be the Education Standards Committee, which would oversee the state board's work around reviewing, creating academic standards, high school graduation requirements, credentials, and the like. The next would be Educator Practice Committee, which would oversee the state board's work around standards for accreditation and certification of teacher prep programs, which is a key distinction from teacher prep in and of itself, as well as teacher retention. The state board has done a great deal of work. There is also a proposal to establish a teacher advisory group that would meet biannually starting next year. And that committee would be overseen by the Educator Practice Committee as well. And then lastly, there is a proposal to create the Advocacy and Outreach Committee, which would oversee the state board's work around parent involvement, supplemental education service providers, as well as our work related to policy, resolutions, legislation, and the like. There is also a proposed parent advisory group that would meet biannually starting next year. And it is suggested that that group is overseen by the Advocacy and Outreach Committee. So one bucket of recommendation is the establishment of those committees. The second group of recommendations is related, but it's around establishing a task force, a short-term task force that would explore what our school needs as they are grappling with the pandemic, and how might we put forth recommendations to support their work over the summer and the fall and moving beyond, as well as creating a ad hoc committee that would focus on the state board's authority relative to DC's governance structures, mayoral control, and the like. That committee is proposed to explore, one, how DC's governance systems compare to other localities, as well as it would focus on surveying the public and figuring out what are opinions about our current structure. And in both of those, the task force and the ad hoc committee would culminate with a public report. The third recommendation is around several process changes. I mentioned creating the parent and educator advisory committees. Again, those will meet biannually and began in 22. It is recommended that Vice President Gasoy lead the parent advisory committee. It is recommended that Representative O'Leary, our resident teacher for life, would lead the educator advisory committee, and that both of those would be for 1 terms. It is recommended that we increase and stagger the number of student representatives, and I'm sure this will come to or be of great interest to Student Representative O'Sullivan. We are recommending that we increase the number of representatives to 3, that we stagger their terms, and that we find a way to center students from Ward 7 and 8 in our decisions, either through the Student Advisory Committee, but in particular as our student representatives. We would charge our Student Advisory Committee to come up with a formal proposal and deliver that to the board by April 30th of this year. And then lastly, there's been a lot of discussion around the board's equity framework. There's a proposal that members would provide an equity statement with any resolution that they would put forward to the board to consider. These equity statements are simply expressions of how that proposed resolution adheres to, advances, supports the board's equity framework and its focus areas, or it does not. And members would be encouraged to take this into consideration as they vote. Almost done here. One other bucket of recommendations centers on appointments for internal board committees. I am not going to read through all of the suggested recommendations, but I will read off the proposed chairs. For the Assessment and Accountability Committee, that again would deal with DC State Accountability Plan, the report card, and the like. It is recommended that that is co-chaired by Jock Patterson, at-large member, and Ruth Wattenberg, Ward 3 member. For our Education Standards Committee, that would oversee the state board's work around updating our social studies standards, as well as any other academic content related work. That would be, or it is proposed that that is chaired by Representative Sutter from Ward 6. The Educator Practice Committee, which relates to all of our efforts around teacher practice, retention, and the like. It is proposed that that is chaired by Representative O'Leary from Ward 4. And then we have the Advocacy and Outreach Committee that would oversee our advocacy and outreach relative to legislation and board policy, parental access, and like. And it is proposed that Representative Reed from Ward 8 would lead or chair that work. For the school reopening amid COVID-19 task force, and hopefully we can find a better name for that, it is proposed that that would be co-chaired by Representative Chang from Ward 2 and myself. And then the proposed ad hoc committee around board authority that would examine how our system of governance compares to other localities, but also survey public opinion. It is proposed that that would be chaired by Representative Thompson from Ward 7. And then last but not least, there are recommendations for external liaison roles. I will quickly go through this and then open it up for discussion. We first have the Everyday Counts Truancy Task Force, which is very important work, and the board is really excited to continue our work with that task force. For the steering committee and for the task force itself, it is proposed that I would serve there. For the program committee, it is recommended that Vice President Gasoy would serve. And for the policy committee, it is recommended that Mr. Hayworth would serve. I would note that there is an additional committee that is not filled currently, and that is the data committee. So if you're interested, please elevate that during our discussion. For the Compact on Educational Opportunity for Military Children, it is proposed that Jack Patterson, our at-large member, would serve there. For Community Schools Advisory Committee, Mr. Hayworth is already serving in that role and doing a great job leading it, so it is proposed that we keep him there. For NASB, which is our national alliance, or the National Alliance of School Board or State Board of Educations across the country, there are two committees in particular there. For their Government Affairs Committee, it is proposed that Representative Sutter from Ward 6 fill that slot, and then Public Education Positions Committee, Representative Thompson from Ward 7 would fill that slot. For the Washington Area Boards of Education, it is proposed that Representative Chang of Ward 2 represent the board. And then last but certainly not least, for the Research Practice Partnership, which is in its infancy, but we're really excited about, it is proposed that Representative Reed of Ward 8 would represent the board in its work formally. So those are the proposals. I am now going to open it up for board discussion. Please raise any praises, questions, comments, critiques. And John Paul, I'm going to ask that you help me just track notes, as we will certainly want to come back to what members have to say. And actually, John Paul, can you help and call? I'm going to ask that members raise your hand, and John Paul is going to call you. And if it's okay, I would recommend that we start with Representative Sutter and Representative Patterson, since I know they have to jump if they have a question or comment.
Sure. Dr. Sutter.
Thank you, and thanks for making it possible for me to comment before I have to hop off, and I apologize for having to leave early this evening. I just wanted to say thank you to you, President Parker. I'm sure this was a lot of diplomacy and a lot of complicated work on your part, and I think you did a really fantastic job of helping slot us all in places where we can add value and work collectively with our colleagues on the board. I specifically appreciate the new members who you've suggested to put on the Education Standards Committee, because I think that we have a lot of work to do on that as a board. And I think that President Wattenberg and I, if we vote to confirm these committees as assigned, would be well served by our new colleagues on that committee. So just wanted to convey my thanks. I'm sure this was hard work, and I appreciate all that you put into it.
Thank you. Dr. Reed.
Ditto what Dr. Sutter said. Question for, or just so I can hear out loud, or for the advocacy committee, there's oversight there, but then it's led by Dr. Gazoy for very obvious reasons. But I'm just curious, what's the differentiation, or how does that play?
I'm sorry, you're asking about the advocacy committee?
Yes, so I think the biennial parent advocacy committee is on there in the purview of that, but then Dr. Gazoy is leading it, but then the committee has oversight. So I'm just kind of listening to your vision for that.
What does the board think? In full transparency, we haven't figured that out. And I see it less as oversight and more that this is personally speaking as a Ward 5 member, I would see that that convening of parents would receive support from the advocacy committee, less as oversight. But I would love to hear what others have to say.
Can I just respond on that point and jump in? I think part of what Representative Reed is pointing to is the statutory authority that we have to create, I think, parent leadership groups or parent, I forget the words. That may be confusing. That is, in theory, something that this board could work with OSSI to propose some citywide group around that. And you're right, it could be the parent advisory committee, but it's really a governance issue that the board hasn't really taken up because OSSE hasn't brought it to us, but we could. Does that help? There's us voluntarily creating something, and then there's sort of this broader statutory possibility.
Yeah, actually, I forgot. Thank you, Ruth. I forgot about the statutory responsibility, even though I just talked about it last night at an ANC meeting. But I think Zach kind of answered the question of it's, just kind of listening in, and maybe Dr. Gazoy is, making sure those meetings are planned and executed, and the oversight advocacy committee is just taking that feedback and making sure, or planning the advocacy around whatever the parent council is saying.
I have a question. Am I jumping in on anybody?
Yeah, Mr. O'Sullivan is next, actually.
Okay.
Oh no, that's fine. If it's related to the discussion, Fraser can go ahead.
No, go on, Alex.
Oh well, I was gonna bring up something totally different. So are you sure? Because I don't want to.
All right. Well, let me just ask a question about it. Were you, Representative Reed? Are you talking about the Advocacy and Outreach Committee, of which you are the chair?
Yes, sir. So I was pointing out because, for instance, it's pretty streamlined. I mean, it makes sense. I was just trying to differentiate roles and get a community understanding of what it might look like if voted upon. But for the teacher advocacy, I know you're the lead, given your history. You're also given the lead of the biannual teacher advocacy. So that streamlines, which is fine. But I was just kind of teeing out roles as we're in this conversation, the initial phases amongst the group now.
Okay, that's all right. Go on, Alex.
Thank you, Mr. O'Sullivan.
All right, thank you, Fraser. Well, a couple of things. It's nice to see that there are so many different committees and task forces and just so much. I had no clue it was going to be this many. There was going to be this many things. And it's so great to see that the board is attacking all of these different problems. So kudos to President Parker and Vice President Gasoy. I was going to say, some of you all may be like wondering, or at least sort of curious about why we want to expand the number of student representatives. And it was actually, it was something I brought up to President Parker. We called a couple months ago, and he suggested this idea of expanding the number. And partially that is from my own experiences, having seen with the state board and the student advisory committee, when we're most effective it's when we're getting the most amount of student voices that we possibly can. And so I think because of that, I wanted to just make sure we could cover all the different regions in our city and all the different student demographics. And I don't think 2 student representatives is enough. Obviously, we do have a student advisory committee that doesn't have a limit on how many members can be a part of it, but it is important that that there are students, especially Ward 7 and 8, that get to be in this position and have the role, have the influence of being a student representative, because they have their own unique set of experiences and perspectives and priorities that I and other student representatives, or like Shayla and Deja in the past, may not have. And also we want to make sure that we're setting up the best system possible for the next batch of student representatives, student advisory committee members going down the road. I think it may serve the state board better if we actually have more student representatives. 3, maybe 4 will be in discussion. We'll see what the student advisory committee thinks. But if we can get more voices involved, at least the leadership of student representatives, hopefully we can also use that to get more voices across the entire city as well. And so because of that, this is something that I wholeheartedly support, and we'll send something, student advisory committee will send something by the end of April about what we would like to do and what we'd like to propose. But, and yes, that was something I was going to bring up, Dr. Reed. We did get a response from Anacostia students. So we got, I was gonna read the list of schools, but we got students from Anacostia, Ballou, Bard. I think there were like 4 or 5 new schools that we got this time. So just big thank you to Representatives Reed and Thompson, and also President Parker, Vice President Gasoy, and anyone who may have helped with outreach, and for being a helping hand in terms of expanding our own outreach. So that's something we're going to continue to do. And this will be another step in the right direction so that we can continue to get more student voices, especially because living in a pandemic, it's important that we get the voices of people who are experiencing the hardest of what's going on right now. So thank you all, and hopefully you guys will support that proposed bylaw change when it comes about.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wattenberg.
If before you go, Representative Wattenberg, I know Representative Sutter had a question around resolution process, and this has been an issue of a lot of focus of a lot of members. So I just want to clarify, there was a proposal put forward that resolutions would kick to one of the committees, in particular the advocacy committee. Given feedback, confusion, and I don't think we had all of the our I's dotted and T's crossed there, that has been retracted. So given this set of these set of recommendations, the resolution process would stay the same. Committees can generate resolutions for the board to consider, and then members would need to introduce resolutions at the working session before a public meeting for it to be considered.
Got it. So just before I hop off, that would suggest that the only resolution we'll consider voting on at the public meeting, unless we get 2/3 support of members, would be the one that establishes our committee structures.
That is correct.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that, Representative Wattenberg.
So first, I just wanted to say congratulations to President and Vice President. I think this was quite something to pull together, and clearly you listened to a lot of people, so I appreciate it. And one of the things I actually wanted to comment on was the resolution process. I had raised a concern about it, some others did, and so I think the way, in the end, you sort of just said, we'll keep it as it is, but the other thing you did, which I want people to think about, is to make it possible. I think you now have the resolutions committee can follow up, or the advocacy committee can follow up on resolutions, which is great, because we need, insofar as we want some of the resolutions to really be more than our position, but to push something forward, that's a group that can do it. But I also think it could be useful going forward to have the resolutions committee be a place where members could bring their resolutions, not so that they could be, I think what people were worried about was members could lose any ability to just go straight to the board. And I don't want people to lose that. But I think if we went to the resolutions committee with our resolutions sometime, the resolutions committee could be like a vetter and sort of say, you know, have you checked with so-and-so? Have you checked with so-and-so? Did you look at this? Did you look at that? And then it would sort of, you know, we might over time move into a routine or a process where things went through the resolutions committee in that kind of a process, not as a way of preventing people to go another way, but as a way of helping things get to the floor in a way that was the healthiest for our discussion and the best for passage. So I just want to throw that out for the future. And I also wanted to say I'm delighted to be working with Jacques Patterson as the co-chair of our committee, and we expect to do great things, and you'll all get to see it, be part of it. That's it.
Mr. President, I don't see any additional questions. Oh, sorry, Dr. Gasoy.
I was just waiting my turn. I just actually have a plug, which is that the Well-Rounded Education Committee has been dissolved. And I do just want to emphasize that what we talked about extensively is that we were thinking that it makes the most sense that well-rounded education and sort of the extension of that, teaching the whole child, it really needs to be woven into everything that we do. That it's sort of like the equity framework. We don't have a framework yet, maybe we will, but that you think of it in a similar way, that, you know, you think about how you mentally create sort of an impact statement about are we really meeting the needs of the whole child? And I just think it's more important now than ever. I have to say that the high dosage tutoring, I get it. I feel like the terminology scares me a little. And I feel like, there's going to be this intensive skill, what do you call it? Drill and kill around math and reading. And that we really have to keep the whole child in our sights. And it's not just SEL, it's not just mental health. It's like a well-rounded curriculum, right? So I'm putting that plug out there.
Yeah, thank you for making that plug. I would just underscore and what I'm hearing Vice President Gasoy say, and what I hope to be true, is that the values of the well-rounded education committee becomes the culture of the board and how we orient to our work. And so I completely agree there. Representative Wattenberg, did I see a hand? Do you have a question or comment?
Well, you did kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to also underscore that. I mean, if I thought the idea was being dissolved, I'd actually be very upset. But I think of it in terms of the accountability group, that it's something we've been talking about. How do you make sure that the accountability is about a well-rounded education, not something narrow? I think the COVID task force has to take, part of what they have to think about is how to have breadth and whole curriculum and whole child. So I guess I just want to say, and I believe I saw it in the letter, that there's really a statement about it. I mean, this becomes then part of our adopted report, that this is something we are going to pay attention to.
Absolutely.
It's not like so in that sense, I don't see it as being devolved. I see it as being dispersed. I certainly feel that way for the committees that I'll be involved in. So I just wanted to pass that on.
So we're going to move on. I want to make clear that there's still room for change, suggestions, tweak between now and the public meeting. There is going to be some work done to make sure that there is a fine crosswalk between that letter and the resolution and the bylaws changes, and so that at the public meeting we can vote in one fell swoop. Representative O'Leary, you have a question?
No, I have a statement for the new members of the board. We can't vote on anything in the business meeting. So the things we talk about in the business meeting, they will be voted on, will only be voted on at the public meetings.
Representative Thompson?
Yeah, I tried to raise my hand the electronic way, but I think Fraser's old school way works better. Maybe it's possible to, like, I hear what Representative Gasoy is saying around well-rounded education being more important than ever right now. Maybe it's possible that before that committee is dissolved, they deliver some type of report or some type of recommendations so that we can actually pick up and incorporate that into our new committee structures. I don't know who all was on that committee, but I do absolutely I understand that as a valuable principle, and I think having some type of recommendations or framework or something so we can move it forward on the same page, if not in committee, could be really helpful.
Yeah, maybe it is something like a framework. Let me think about it, because I will be honest that before the pandemic, we grappled with how to assess or to what we should actually do around it. We didn't have enough money to do really in-depth research. And then when the pandemic hit, so what we were going to do was just sort of take a survey and find out what teachers and principals say they're doing and what they say they want to do, and kind of looking at around, non-tested subjects. To me, it didn't feel like enough, but it was like a first step. I feel like when we pivoted to the webinars, which was more like hearing from folks in the field, that was getting closer to it actually. So it never fully developed is what I would say. But maybe this is an opportunity to rethink it again and think about how we would weave it into everything else. So thank you for that, that push. I think it's a good one.
Agreed. One thing that committee did do was define what we mean by well-rounded education. And so perhaps that could be a jumping off place to make some of those recommendations. So
good point
on that. All right, let's keep the conversation going. Again, I want to empower you all to make changes if you see them as necessary between now and the public meeting. You will get another copy of the resolution and the proposed bylaws changes before then. But these are proposals. And so I just want to underscore that. With no further comment here. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say, following up on Student Representative O'Sullivan's comments, he also provided feedback about what happens continuity-wise to the Student Advisory Committee if both student reps fall off of the board at the same time, which I believe is slated to be the case this time around. And so
so it happened for my term last year. So when I came in, my other student rep, Deja, was also her first time because they, according to John Paul, they had a senior and a junior, but the junior decided not to reapply. And so because of that, it just sort of left a situation where it was 2 new student representatives and they just didn't have that sort of, I don't know, we were inexperienced, of course. So we didn't have the leadership within the other student representative that we would have liked, but.
It's called institutional knowledge, Alex.
Institutional knowledge. I share that to say part of what may not come through loud and clear that was discussed is giving flexibility to the Student Advisory Committee if they find it necessary to extend the term of current members to support in that staggering of student representative terms. And so more to come on that, Student Representative O'Sullivan, but I did just want to elevate that is a possibility if that would help us get to the staggering and logistically figuring that out. So we are now going to move on to website updates. I'm really excited that the State Board is undertaking a very important project to update our website, because I think it is one of the first interactions between the board and the public. And I can speak for myself that there is room for improvement with our website, just in terms of its user friendliness. And so Caitlin and Malaya are gonna share some thoughts and proposals with us, and we will go on. So Caitlin and Malaya, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Thanks, Zachary. I actually think Malaya might be having some connectivity issues. She just got kicked off of Zoom, but she just slacked me. But in the meantime, I will work on sharing my screen. Okay, thank God. Okay. Okay, sorry, hold on. John Paul, I seem to not be able to share some of my things. Like, I was going to share it over preview, but it's not popping up. So that's kind of awkward.
Yeah, you have to open the file entirely.
It is, yeah.
Okay, give me 1 second and I can share.
Nope, no stress, no stress. While we...
Okay, hold on. It's going to happen so very shortly.
I was going to give some background context.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, there we go.
Amazing. Okay, Malaya, we want to get started.
Sure. So SBOE website is badly in need of a content refresh and redesign. We want our visitors and stakeholders to have a more to find what they're looking for in less clicks. Whether they want to find a sister office, contact a member of the board, or find meeting information, we have to improve the way it looks and feels. So we commissioned the help of Octo, who took all of our capability needs for the site into consideration and provided us with a proposal to revamp the site. We also asked them to provide us with some sample sites that they've recently completed, and we narrowed those down into these 3 sites which best meet our needs. So Caitlin will quickly take us through some of the features and benefits of those sites.
Thanks, Malayo. So I'll just be quickly discussing the aspects from these sample websites that we like and are thinking of implementing onto our own website. So the first example is from sustainable.dc.gov. We really liked having this big prominent header to introduce our users. We also liked having this general 3-column setup for content on our homepage. Based off of the feedback we got from both the Office of the Student Advocate and Office of the Ombudsman, we wanted the homepage to really, like in a big way, feature all 3 of our offices side by side, so that it can be extremely clear for users to figure out who they need to reach and what information they need to find. Additionally, having these 3 items per row can be great to highlight different important items, such as our meeting calendar, maybe like a new report that came out of OSA or the Ombudsman's office, our committee work, or anything that is really top of mind. We also liked having like these colors for each row. As you can see, like this one has like a white background for this row, and this one has a green background, and that can help with the visual breakup of all the content here. And then the next example is from helpmegrow.dc.gov. We liked how it's really small up here, but if you can point your eyes to it, there is where it shows that language accessibility, because we do want to prioritize accessibility on our website, making sure it's optimized both for your desktop and your mobile phone as well. And I'm sure Octo will do a great job with that. And then we also liked that big header. And then we also liked this Twitter module, like you can embed your Twitter feed onto your homepage. We currently have this right now, and we don't think it needs to take up all this space, but we did want to note that we do want to maintain it just because our Twitter feed has our most up-to-date information. And our last example is from the DC 2020 census page. And we liked this module up over here. So it could be used for like a really strong call to action item. So for example, for the all teacher survey, this would have been a great space to utilize on our homepage. And literally anything that is top of mind for the state board, we can just swap out for each item that we want to push out really prominently. And then we also thought it'd be kind of cool if we could embed a YouTube video onto our homepage. It could be one of our like quick 30-second ads that Malaya helped create, or even like embedding one of our public meetings or working sessions as they're happening or something, just to make it as useful as a website as possible. So that being said, I will pass it back to Malayo to discuss feedback opportunities.
Thanks. So while we're working with Octo to redesign the site, there are opportunities, if anyone is interested, to provide us with your feedback before the site is complete. During week 5, we'll be able to have a sneak peek and look at the feel and look of the site. And during weeks 9 to 11, we'll be able to do some user testing to make sure everything is running smoothly. Caitlin and I will be in touch when we're closer to that phase in the timeline to see if you are interested in providing any feedback. Thank you. Any questions?
Can you speak a little bit more to the feedback process that you're anticipating? Is it more informal that members should just reach out, or should we be thinking about carving out space? Would it be helpful for you to carve out space in our working sessions to have those feedback opportunities?
Malayo, I could speak to that. I mean, I think it's really up to the board in terms of the best way to do that. My suggestion would be that we not do that during working sessions, but allow members who are interested in participating to have a separate meeting with the staff and with Octo to get some of that feedback, but then make sure that the full board was updated either through a written report or through something else to make sure what input was being given in case they had different opinions or different thoughts about it. But I think website design. I've done a number of websites designs over the years in different offices, and I feel like an iterative process is very important to make sure that we're closing all the loops and making sure that everyone who provides comments has a response to those comments or understands what the process is moving forward. That would be my suggestion. Ms. Wunberg?
So do I understand this right, Jean-Paul, that you would, that there would be sort of groups of members that could get together offline? I mean, not at this session, but together so that we could sort of brainstorm with you guys about what was working or didn't and what would help?
Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly what the method of that would be. It may be that once we get into for instance, for the initial stages of the most important priorities of what we want to see on the website, I think that could be a larger discussion in terms of maybe even 10, 15 minutes at a working session. If we're down to the design pieces and saying, oh, I don't like this here, and I would rather this text be Times New Roman versus, Calibri or something, I think that type of thing could be done better in a Google form or another way that people have the time to actually look through all of the potentials and be able to offer comments. So I think it's a mix of both. But yes, I mean, the idea is that the website is public facing, but it represents you as a board and as an elected officer. So we want to make sure that it is representative of us as an agency, and the consumer is really the public, and so we need to make sure that that's in mind as well. Which is, as we were going through the example websites, one of the things that I particularly pulled out or looked at was the translation features at the top. Is something that's personally very important to me, to make sure that that is accessible not only in different languages, but also accessible in terms of and I'm going to blank on the name because I want to say 802B, but that's a federal budget thing. It's the for individuals who are blind or have hearing impairment, so that they can read websites more appropriately. It is a federal requirement. I cannot remember. It's 80 something. Anyway, but those types of things are really important to me.
So the one thing I would, I think it's the first part, not the second part, that I'm interested in, which is sort of being able to sort of look at it and sort of, be the public. Like, I'm trying to find X. Can I find X? And I'd like to, I think that it was Ebony, Representative Thompson, who said this last time, that she thinks when she talks, and Jean-Paul will remember that is very much how I think, is by talking and brainstorming. And so I would really appreciate the ability to do that with a group of people, not just myself looking at something and sending it in or talking to one person, but to be part of a little group to really try to brainstorm and see how this will work. And
yeah, no, absolutely. And that's much later stage than the initial stages, right? So we need to have a mock-up in order for that to happen. And that's pretty far down the line.
Agree,
and I want to make sure.
Just to be clear, agree, it's a little further down the line, but it's definitely not at the point of what typeface, right? I mean, it's sort of.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yes, yes. And Caitlin is right now putting and we'll put the PowerPoint out to you all as well. It's on Assembly, but we do encourage you we'll send a full list of all of the websites that we thought we kind of look through and see things. And we're happy also to hear what you think about different websites other than the three sort of main ones that we highlighted today. But also, so Caitlin's putting the three in the chat, and we'll send you a full update as well as some others that you can look at. And thank you, Dr. Reed. 508 compliant. Yes, I knew there was a number 8 in there somewhere. I appreciate it. Ms. Thompson, I believe you had a question.
I'm sorry, I might have missed it, and it could just be deliriousness from hunger. But did we talk about a timeline for this project?
We have not in this group. The previous board did discuss a little bit of a timeline. And so that is a really good question. We are one of the favorite people for Octo right now, and we have told them that we would like it to be done by September 30. So the end of the fiscal year. Usually what they told us is that often agencies will come and say, hey, we need a website in 24 hours. And so we have a lot of time to not only do this right, because this is going to be our website for a while, right? This is an expensive process. And so we want to make sure that we get it right, but also something that is long-term, something that we can continue to update and don't have to necessarily do large changes on for a significant amount of time, but also meets all of the needs that we're talking about. And I'm really glad that we have, 8 months really to do all of this work. And it doesn't have to be done in a rushed fashion. We can check, we can involve our, we can even bring some, what is this, how do you think this mock-up looks to our communities and say, would you go here? Would you look at this? How would you respond? And so it doesn't have to be a sort of rush process, which I'm really appreciative of the board in going through this, kind of long-term process. I do, Dr. O'Leary, I see you. Give me 1 second. I do want to note one other thing. Part of the other discussion that we did have with the previous board on this project was also to include our database for meetings. Right now, as you know, we use Assembly and eBoard systems in order to provide that information as easily as that current system does to the public. It is searchable, it is challenging sometimes to use, and it's not directly on our website, which is a problem, right? We did also ask Octo to bid on a project to replace that and embed it in our actual website. Unfortunately, the cost was very high. And what I mean by very high is it was over $100,000 to do that. And we don't have anywhere near that in the budget to do that kind of design. And so I want to be clear from the beginning that part, the Assembly meeting notes part, will be continuing for the future. So that is not going to be part of this project. Dr. O'Leary.
That's all right, John Paul. I'll get back to you.
Can I just say, John Paul, my computer froze as you were talking about that, so I'll be in touch.
Great. If there are other questions, feel free to send them directly to me, Malayo, or Caitlin. I'm really appreciative of their leadership on this project. I think it's really it's nice for me to be able to hand off something to people that I know are going to succeed, and that's one of the things I love about my team is I have everybody will do it the exact way that they need to do a project, and my team is amazing. I don't know if you've noticed that part yet, but they are amazing.
We noticed.
Our team, John Paul, our team.
Thank you, President Parker.
And yes, they are amazing. Many thanks, Caitlin and Malayo, for your leadership on the website. I'm really excited to see what we come up with. We are nearing the end of our meeting. Next up, we're going to have committee reports. And I believe the only report we have tonight is from our Student Advisory Committee. I will say if other former committee leads want to extend conversations from our retreat, understanding in particular the teacher retention and the well-rounded education committees, time was cut short, feel free to share any important updates. But first, we're going to hear from our Student Advisory Committee.
Thank you, President Parker. So as I mentioned earlier, we're planning our next event, which is scheduled for February 16th. And it looks like it will be at 6:30 p.m. It will be a Zoom webinar, and you all are all invited to join. We encourage all of you all to come and listen to what we're preparing, which is we've organized a panel, I believe, of now 15 high school students that are now members of the Student Advisory Committee. As I said earlier, a lot of this in terms of how many students we were able to get and from which schools were thanks to the efforts of state board members like Representative Thompson, Representative Reed, and then anyone who may have sent out the interest survey. So we were able to get students from Blue High School, Anacostia, Bard, Early College, KIPP DC, I think were the for the new schools that we got. We still need members from wards 1 and ward 6 on the student advisory committee. So Representative Sutter is not here, but that's something I'll definitely let her know. But we still do need some students from those schools. One student is the goal. We can work with one student. That's a student that we can contact, we can text, we can email, we can ask them, do you have any other friends? Do you know of anybody who wants to come join? That's the way we can actually make tangible change in terms of who's represented in our advisory committee and thus on the board as well. And so while we are making small progresses, they will quickly turn into larger successes in terms of getting more people represented. And that's something that I've definitely seen in terms of once you can kind of get your foot in the door, it's a whole lot easier to actually get the entire room that's waiting. And besides that, we are going to touch on topics at the event, such as, one, school reopening, but also how distance learning is going for students. So we're going to talk about, as we did in the previous event, something, the synchronous versus asynchronous balance. We'll also be talking about student mental health and student engagement in the online learning setting. And all of you all are welcome to join. There will be Q&A, of course, that you all can put forth and ask the students anything that you need to. We have a student advisory committee meeting this next Monday at 5:30 p.m. I will send invites to all of you in case you all would like to join. We'll be preparing more for that event, and I think we'll touch on a few other topics. You all probably will not be able to be guest speaker or present anything. Hopefully we can allow you guys that opportunity back in March after this event has finished. And I promise I'll probably be more responsive with emails. But for now, that's kind of where all of our efforts are going. Let me know if you have any questions. I know Caitlin and Malayo should send out the, or they will have finished the flyer, I believe, by Friday. And then we'll send that out with the official Zoom registration so you all can come and watch, but it'll be Tuesday, February 16th. So I hope all of you all are there. And with that, I believe that's everything we needed to say. So thank you guys.
Thank you. It seems like you have a question from Representative O'Leary.
Yes, I have I'm wondering if you could also put on your list about attendance to virtual learning.
That is something that I will add. I know there was a student who talked about it last event, and I'm sure he'd be more than happy to talk about it in this one too. I believe that may be one of the topics covered. I don't have the exact list, but we'll try to cover all of them. If there are any other topics you guys would like to see covered, you can let me know and we'll do our best to try to fit those in. But Emily, I think I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, actually it's kind of similar to what Carlene raised in the chat, which is we would love to hear from students what you want after this school year. So summer and next school year, how can we think more creatively and intelligently about what should we be doing? What should we be planning for? Also, yeah, can you send, if you have a blurb about it that I can share with a Ward 1 student, that would be great. Otherwise, I can just take what you said.
All right, no problem. We may be a bit too late to get another student on the panel. We'll see what we can do. But they should send out, Caitlin and Malayo should be finished with like the Zoom registration and flyer, stuff like that by Friday. And also just, that is one of the topics we plan on covering. So I'll actually pull it up right now in terms of all the topics. So we'll have student mental health, synchronous, asynchronous balance, testing / like standardized testing, how students are sort of feeling about how it's operating, school reopening plans, and also like school reopening in the future and how we imagine education in the future. Then like online learning platforms, grades / transparency and communication with teachers, and then finally student engagement in the online setting. So those are all topics we'll cover. Let me know if there are any other ones you guys would like to see the students talk about, but you guys will get the opportunity to ask questions to the panelists.
Awesome. Thank you, Representative O'Sullivan. I will also just plug the events that Representative O'Sullivan is organizing for his school. So not only is he organizing for the state board, he holds, I think, quarterly conversations with his fellow students at BASIS. And so I've attended several, as I know several other members have, Representative O'Leary and Weidenberg and others, and Sutter. I would just encourage you all to check those out as well. I'm just continuously floored by how amazing our young people are. So thank you again for that. Representative O'Leary, did you want to say anything additional about teacher retention? Totally optional.
No.
Okay. Representative Gasoy? Nope. All right. That sounds good to me. With that, we are going to move to new business. Are there any items that members would like to share for the good of the order with the board or introduce as new business? Representative Reed.
We had a great outdoor learning event. Thank you, Representative Gazoy, for organizing with the Friends of Oxen Run Park today. And the next one is March 10th, Wednesday at 10:30, March 10th, again at Oxen Run Park.
That is awesome. Yeah, I saw pictures and it looks like it's growing. So I'm really excited to see how it started as an idea and more families are taking advantage. Any other topics to put on the radar? Representative Thompson?
I know you all need another meeting to go to, like you need a hole in your head. We are still meeting as the Ward 7 Ed Council, and we're talking about budget tomorrow. So if you have people, we accept people from other boards too, but if you have people who are looking for just an overview of the budget process, we're going to do that tomorrow. In addition to Councilmember Gray will be with us to give some more updates about the vaccine rollout, which I know a lot of the board members had questions around. He is, in addition to our board council member, the committee chair for health. So let me know if you want to attend. You can also just email the Ward 7 Ed at Yahoo email address, and we'll send you the Zoom information.
Awesome. Anything else?
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Properly seconded.
Patterson got it first.
I would like to, by the sound of aye, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
If you are opposed, please say nay. It seems like the ayes have it, and at 8:02, we will call this meeting to a close. Thank you all for a very productive meeting. Members of the public, thank you for joining, and we look forward to being in touch as we head towards our February public meeting. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Good to see everyone.